All right. I suppose it's like a tradition of political commentators to eventually engage with a Jubilee video. I suppose. I mean, to be honest, I don't really want to engage. I didn't really want to engage much with like a lot of Jubilee videos because I often see like I do not like the style and the format of Jubilee. I'll be honest. It's like superly stupid, like overly commodified dreck that ultimately I don't think like really achieves the like purposes for as to what like I don't know anything wants. I don't think it's a right wing op Boy Meets Mini. I think it's just more sort of the problems of like commodified fucking media kind of a deal. Like it's like modern day debate and stuff like that, where it's just like, oh, they're having trying to have like heckin' based epic convo arenas, but it's sold like for the express purpose of trying to make like a profit, generally speaking, and we wanted to have like discussions about like highly charged political topics and stuff like that. Like I don't know, like the environment of a debate format like this, I don't think is really conducive because like 20 dudes and there's like one person. I think it's just like a complete fucking shit show fest. And I like again, look at the cucked lefty complaining about commodified media, I guess. Oh man, fucking sue me, dude. Whoa. It turns out the over commodification of media and stuff like that's actually kind of bad, guys, and is not very conducive to good educational outcomes. But the funniest part about this video used to be called a Christian versus 20 atheists, and now it's called Jordan Peterson versus 20 atheists. Like, where's the Let me see what the form like. Let me. I should have probably prepped this. This would have been a smart thing for me to do. Is what Jordan Peterson. All right, Jordan Peterson. Yum yum yeah. Because like it got changed to because it used to be a Christian versus 20 atheists, and then it got changed to Jordan Peterson versus 20 atheists. And the reason for this is because, and I wholeheartedly believe this, by the way. I think it's Jordan Peterson is the main guy who pushed for this. To be fucking honest, uh, why? It should be fairly obvious. Because, dude, like, think about it for like literally 3 seconds. Jordan Peterson is the dude who can't be committed to any position whatsoever. His whole shtick is to basically exist in this sort of like a superposition of being a what a conscientious objector or whatever. And the whole thing is that if he is committed to any fucking position, right? If he's have to be held to account to any fucking position, and here's like the title change, by the way. One Christian versus 20 atheists featuring Jordan Peterson. It got changed like 4 hours later because he got fucking cooked. And it became Jordan Peterson versus 20 atheists. But yeah, back to what I was saying. He's forced to sort of like have this like superposition as a conscientious objector, where I exist in a position where I just simply have problems with a lot of like different things, and I have a lot of like criticisms of intonations in Western college, like Western society and stuff like that, and blah blah blah. He'll do like a whole like bluster spiel about like Western civilization or some shit, and he can't commit to any position because if he commits to any fucking position, the whole fucking thing kind of collapses in on itself because of the simple fact that, whoa, if he is forced to have to defend any like moral or ethical fucking position, that causes fucking problems for him because of the fact that, hey, now he has to defend the sort of associated baggage with a lot of those systems that, he purports to support or defend. And Jordan Peterson can't have any of that because, again, while he's the conscientious philosophical objector, like his whole shtick started from his sort of, look at me going after C16, which is a bill which has never been enforced, like, ever. There's, like, maybe, like, one sort of, like, funny-looking case where it happened. And now, because of this sort of, like, position as, like, this objector that he has sort of built a niche for himself, he can never answer any questions when he's asked. He will always do the thing where it's just like, well, I mean, you may, like, think that particular thing about me, or, like, I just need to understand that you have to be able to give your definitions for a thing because, you know, what does this thing mean? And the only reason why he does that all the time is to fucking obfuscate from the fact that, in reality, he believes in a lot of bad shit. Let's be honest here. He is a Christian. He just wants to not be one because he doesn't want to deal with the associated baggage with being a fucking Christian. That's the fucking problem. But, you know, let's see. Starting off, I think, with the banger clip that basically, I think, perfectly captures, like, Jordan Peterson in a nutshell. And he gets mad about it. He gets real fucking triggered about it and doesn't want to answer to this fucking kid's fucking goddamn questions. Because, of course, the kid fucking perfectly calls him out as a dude who doesn't believe in anything.
You're a Christian. You say that. I haven't claimed that. Oh, what is this? Is this Christian versus atheist?
Don't be a smartass.
Either you're a Christian or you're not. Which one is it?
You're really quite something. You are.
Aren't I? But you're really quite nothing. Right? You're not a Christian.
I'm done with him.
That is perfect. That is how you should engage with someone like Jordan Peterson. Because he doesn't believe in anything. He believes in absolutely fucking nothing. Perfect. That clocks him 100 fucking %. Because he doesn't believe in anything. Because of the fucking superposition. Literally, if I were to fucking goddamn describe Jordan Peterson, it's this meme. It's literally this. This is Jordan Peterson. This is Jordan Peterson.
Time to listen up, you silly liberal fruitcakes.
Oh, he's mad.
To be a striver, a crusader.
We should call trans women she.
Guys, if I believe in basically everything, you know.
Women went back to the home.
Whoa! I don't have to fucking be accountable to any position if I just believe everything, guys. Actually, that's not 100% true for fucking Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson, I believe, has only one belief, and that is like a sort of like schizophrenic fear of communism. I think that's the one only consistent position that I think Jordan Peterson maintains. Because what he himself has also said in interviews that, like, yeah, I keep a bunch of communist memorabilia in my house to constantly act as a reminder of the enemy. Yeah. It's Jordan Peterson. It's literally him. Because he doesn't believe in anything. He believes in nothing. Praise be the superposition of ideology. Praise be. Hallelujah. Yeah, white people do be like that. Cool. Lovely. Fantastic. Let's continue.
Hello there. I'm Dr. Jordan Peterson. I'm a clinical psychologist, a professor emeritus at the University of Toronto, an author, a podcaster, public speaker, and today I'm surrounded by 25 atheists.
Oh, it's 25.
My first claim, atheists reject God, but they don't understand what they're rejecting.
I'm trying to think, like, of this first claim. So, atheists reject God, but they don't understand what they're rejecting. What does he mean by this? That atheists don't have, like, a definition for us, like, what is God? This is so fucking weird because, again, like, he says that he's not a Christian, but he's supposed to be the fucking Christian, yet he has a problem with the atheists rejecting God. This is what I mean by, bro, he believes in nothing.
Good afternoon, Dr. Peterson.
How you doing?
So this claim here that atheists don't know what they're rejecting. My background is in studying to become a traditional Catholic priest, daily mass, daily rosary, going on long retreats, deep into the magisterium and biblical hermeneutics. Like I was thoroughly in it. And it seems like I do know what I'm missing. Is there something that I missed over years of study about this issue formally and living out religion so deeply?
Well, you obviously feel that you missed something when you were practicing for the priesthood. Your aim was off then. So there's always the possibility that it's still off now.
What was off about my aim in the first place?
I don't know. That might take a long time to figure out.
But then it seems kind of like this no true Scotsman type of fallacy in which you're the arbiter of people's aims and how they understand those aims to be. How is it that you can claim that people...
The Jordan Peterson classic. He loves this fucking fallacy. Because he's a fucking pseudo-intellectual who fucking believes that he's smarter than everyone else around him.
People don't know something that you know about their life despite not having met them?
Well, it's obviously a generic claim, just like the atheist claim that there's no God is a generic claim. In your case, it would have to be specified more, and I'm not claiming to understand what was going on in your mind, but my experience with atheists is twofold. Is that they have a very reductive notion of what constitutes God, let's say in the Judeo-Christian tradition, and they've often been hurt by someone who was religious or by the religious enterprise, or perhaps by God himself, so to speak, and that's left them with an animus.
But I think that you have a reductive view of what atheism is. You've defined religion so broadly to include any sort of having aim in life, any sort of cultural archetype, having a metaphorical substrate. And atheism, too, is a very specific type of like 3 people in the world that are these Raskolnikov type of, they want to get away with the perfect murder. It seems like you have the reductive view of what an atheist is.
Well, let's start with your claim. How do you define the God that you're rejecting? Like, what is God to you? You studied in the church, you found that unsatisfactory.
So here's the classic of Jordan Peterson constantly. He loves asking people for definitions as like a sort of way to, well, not be able to stake any claim. To not, because again, here the shtick with fucking Jordan Peterson is the fact that he has to sort of be in the superposition of conscientious objector, where he can't fucking believe in anything, because if he does start believing in things, well, you know, he starts to have some fucking problems, right? Because if he starts to believe in something, you know, as like most people would do, he would have to answer those questions. And those questions may be tough for him to answer. Because, you know, his whole thing is that he's just a pseudo-intellectual. He's just a grifter who wants to pretend to be smarter than everyone else. That's it.
Satisfactory. How would you characterize what you rejected?
I think the average Christian believer, when they say that they're Christian and they believe, they mean some sort of God that is all-powerful, all-perfect, is somehow involved in the matters of this world, and that we look to them through wisdom and with Logos incarnate in Christ. And it also seems like you don't believe in religion in the way that the average Christian says that they believe in religion. And there are as many gods out there as there are believers, because everybody has mutually exclusive and different views of what God is. So it seems
Well,
like...
if everybody had mutually exclusive views of what God is, no one could speak to each other. The mere fact of communication presumes a commonality of assumption and definition. And so, and it's certainly not the case that I regard any archetypal manifestation whatsoever as equally religious. So that's not a real claim. Let me give you an example. For example, there's a sub-narrative in the story of Moses where Moses is rewarded with a glimpse of God. Okay? And that's one of the ways that God is characterized in the Old Testament stories. Now, Moses is a faithful servant of God and a good man. At least that's the case within the confines of the story.
One possible interpretation.
It's the case within the confines of the story, obviously. But
Well, obviously. When we look at the Bible can't precisely say anything because there are so many different exegetical and hermeneutic views of this particular book, and that everybody has agreed or everybody has disagreed historically on. It seems like even the most benign detail about a book this big, and it seems like you can only say that the Bible says something if you first presuppose that it's univocal.
So your claim essentially is that Moses in the Old Testament plays the role of a villain or is irrelevant? Because the alternative claim is that he's good.
Know, because we can't talk to those authors.
If you are going to start with the presupposition that there's nothing I can say about any of these stories,
Guys, okay, this is why I never really like all these like fucking religion debates constantly, because it's something that's always going to be incredibly subjective, and it just comes down purely to interpretation. Like, what does a particular person think about this interpretation of like this particular part of the text in scripture, or blah 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 blah. You can like do the whole like fucking rigmarole of I know. Well, I think it's like this. Well, I think it's like this. Well, I think it's this. It could be this or some shit. You know, it becomes like a whole fucking meme.
that you're not going to disagree with from the perspective that there are multiple potential competing claims, then I can't speak with you.
So we also have a short time here, so I want to get to the core of what you're arguing here, and I'd love if we could...
The core of what I'm arguing is that atheists reject God, but they don't understand what they're rejecting. So I'm trying to give you an example of what's being rejected and its complexity. Okay, so God rewards Moses with a glimpse of the divine. So this is a definition of the God that atheists are hypothetically rejecting.
A possible one.
I said I didn't say the. I said
That is possible, yes.
Okay, so despite the fact that Moses is a stellar character and he's had a long and difficult life and can withstand a lot of difficulty and travail, God puts him between two cliffs, so he can just see a crack of what's in front of him. And when God walks by, he allows him to see his back. Okay, so the implication of that story is that the divine is fundamentally unknowable. It's a pinnacle experience, and that people in their finitude have to be shielded from a comprehensive vision of the basis of reality. Well, that's not the God that's defined in that manner, right? It's not a simple personification. It's not a simple old man in the sky. It's something that, in its essence, is unknowable and overwhelming. And that isn't, in my experience, the God that's defined by atheists who are attempting to undermine the story. I mean, it's the same claim, for example, that you're a finite creature, and that you face something that, in the final analysis, is unknowable, and that you
hold on. Have atheists ever made that claim that, like, well, I mean, that's like the popular sort of a sort of like interpretation of like what God looks like in media, that he's like an old fucking man. Have like atheists, broadly speaking, have they made the claim that that God looks like just like an old ass man, right? Like those are like what the memes look like, because that's how popular media interprets God looking like. They interpret him as like, I don't know, some fucking old ass dude in a beanbag chair who has like crazy amounts of fucking power, right? That's media interpretations of God, right? I don't think that's like a thing that atheists are broadly speaking. Like, what is like the atheist argument of like what I assume probably gets gotten into here.
You have to establish a relationship with it regardless of your inability to perceive or even withstand perceiving the whole. Okay, is there a problem with that?
The problem is that when we look at, famously, when you've been asked, do you believe in God, the question becomes, what do we mean by God? And in the Bible, it's not even clear the biblical authors know what God is, because Yahweh has historically emerged from an early storm God, a deity that doesn't exhaust the category of deity, and has changed over the Old Testament. Does God have physicality? Does God not have physicality? It seems like, yes, if you define religion to mean anybody that has an aim, anybody that looks at the unknown, anybody who wants to go from chaos to order is inherently religious, then yes, but also in the same way, I could define atheist as somebody who doesn't dogmatically believe in religion, or somebody who doesn't regularly attend religious services or belong to a denomination. To help especially the audience, kind of like boil this down, there's a lot of words there. The central claim is that we exist somewhere between the finite and the infinite.
Central claim.
A central claim is that we exist somewhere between the finite and the infinite.
No, I said that we were finite and we had to establish a relationship with the infinite.
Yeah, then in that case, then we're all religious. But then I can do the same thing and define one particular element of atheism. It seems like we both have a reductive view of what the other side looks like, to the point where a conversation seems incoherent, not just incoherent, but not in the way that the average Christian understands Christianity to be.
Do you have a problem?
Pause there. Sorry, you voted out with the majority.
This is why I do not like Jubilee, because they just get like randomly voted out, even though like they were actually trying to get somewhere there, I guess this is my sort of like main gripe that I have with like Jubilee. So I guess like overall, the sort of idea here is just like, hey man, like we're just kind of like talking past one another, which is fine for Jordan Peterson's sort of like shtick, because again, he's okay with constantly talking past another fucking dude and just like never agreeing on like any definitions, because again, he can't commit to believing in anything actually. That's like the sort of like, shtick of Jordan Peterson. I've seen God and she's a woman and looks like Gravemind from Halo. Yeah, you can just say that, and no one else can prove otherwise, right? I can say that God is black or some shit. Like the stupid dumbass like liberal meme of like, I met God, she's black or some shit, right? We can do that, right? No one's stopping me from doing that. Fuck it.
Hey, how's it going? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, David. Good to see you.
Tell me everything that you know about the Polynesian deity Lono, L-O-N-O.
I don't know anything about Polynesian deity Lono.
So you're rejecting something without knowledge of what you're rejecting.
I'm not rejecting it. No more than I'm
Do you
rejecting
believe in
anything
Lono?
I don't know anything
Do you believe in
about.
Lono? Do you believe that he is a
relevance
deity
of
that exists in the world, exists in the universe, exists in the existence of everything? Do you believe that Lono
I'll
is
answer
a
that
deity?
question once you answer my question, which is, do I reject everything that I'm ignorant of? Because that's your presupposition that undergirds your argument, and unless you can prove that that's valid, then there's no point.
My question is quite simple.
Yeah, but that doesn't
Do
mean
you
it's
believe-
formulated accurately.
Do you believe that Lono exists?
Another classic of Jordan Peterson, just having like annoying little fucking gripes about particular people's fucking questions to avoid answering the fucking question, because he doesn't want to answer any questions constantly.
Yes or no?
I'm not going to answer that question for the reasons I just described. You already insisted that if I reject something, that if I'm ignorant of something, I reject it. Do you think that everyone in the world has to know everything simultaneously for that to be valid and true?
I think in order for your
Answer that
argument
question.
to be true, in order for it to be true that we atheists don't understand what we're rejecting, then you need to also apply that to yourself and to Christians and to Muslims and to any other person on this earth, where if you don't understand what you're rejecting the belief in, then you can't.
You're trying to hold Jordan. Debater, you're doing the thing, trying to hold Jordan Peterson to a standard. That's the biggest mistake of all, because again, Jordan Peterson doesn't want to be held to any standards. Again, it's all about maintaining the fucking superposition, where like he can believe in everything and nothing, and like somehow everything, something, nothing, maybe something, kind of, maybe, whatever the fuck, everything at the same time, right?
Can't reject the belief in it. That's the implication of your
I didn't
claim.
say that I rejected the belief in Lono. I said I
It's
didn't know who Lono was. I didn't say anything about
That's
rejecting.
because I've asked you several times and you haven't. But let me get to my even greater point. You're saying atheists don't understand what religion is or what God is in order to be able to reject it fully or completely. We have someone over here who studied it in their own way. I've studied religion. I have a degree in religious studies, specialty in Christianity and Mediterranean traditions. And further than that, beyond me, Pew Research studies suggest that atheists and agnostics actually know more about religion and about religious stories, the foundational principles, than believers.
That's because they're more religious than they think they are.
Okay, you can.
They're concerned with deep matters, and one of the defining characteristics of someone who's oriented in religious direction is that they're concerned with deep matters.
Okay.
In fact, it's virtually definition.
Right, but they also have to identify with a religious tradition and accept the foundational stories that go along
Well, that
with
would mean more that they're sectarian than that they're religious. And most people, for example, in the United States, deny that they're religious but accept that they're spiritual.
Pause there. You've been voted out with the majority.
Nice to meet you.
How are you doing? What's your name?
I'm Greg. Nice to meet you. Okay, so I feel like you're getting at this idea of polysemy, where we have multiple related meanings for a word, right? Like, for example, a famous...
Yeah, like, again, like I said, this is another thing that Jordan Peterson fucking will do. He will just kind of, like, because he didn't really engage with what's being said there, right? Like, how does he know exactly of, like, this particular, what was it, Lono, was it? I think was the god. And he, I guess technically speaking, did he, like, reject Lono? No, he just said he, like, doesn't know anything about Lono or some shit. It's one of those things where it's just like, whatever.
Painting can be emotionally moving in that it changes my emotional state. And when I was on the highway coming here to the studio, I was physically moving. I was changing my position. If I said, I believe the Mona Lisa is very moving, and you said, you don't really understand what you're saying, it's nailed to the wall, I would say that you're the one who doesn't understand what I'm saying, not the other way around. And the way that relates to this is there are many concepts of God, and I'll admit, I find a lot of what you say about that interesting. I'm familiar with it. The idea of this kind of Jungian hierarchical thing, or as a metaphor, or a symbol, or the kind of, atheist, materialist, literalist idea of a agentic, omnipotent, omniscient being that intervenes in reality, right? So when I'm saying that I reject the concept of God, I'm aware of these other definitions of God, but I think that when we use words, we tend to only imply one meaning at a time. So the same way that I would say the Mona Lisa is moving emotionally, but I would not say it's moving physically. I would say I reject the concept of God in this very literal way. But
What literal way?
the way that God is this omniscient, omnipotent, agentic, supernatural being that sent his son down and has, caused miracles and all these things like that. The idea of God is
Do you think that there's an underlying unity of things?
Could you explain that question?
Well, scientists, for example, believe that science unifies in a comprehensive theory. Do you? Yes? No? Or
I know
there are
that
multiple
people-
competing truths? Those are the options. Either things unify, or there are multiple competing truths.
I think that I know that, for example, like in physics, people are looking for like a theory of everything.
And why do you think they're doing that?
It's interesting, it's helpful.
But they also believe that there's an underlying unity to things.
In a sense, yeah, like, I mean, like the material world and time and space are probably governed by universal laws and principles.
Partly that, yes, yes. But that the same thing might extend to a broader domain that would include imagination and value.
Could you help me connect that to the prompt?
I'm trying to define God, the God that I don't think atheists do a very good job of defining. Here's another question for you. What do you think guides you in your determination of whether or not what you're saying to me is true?
Can we go back? Can we say what we were talking about?
We are.
Okay.
You're just uncomfortable with the question.
No, I feel like you're just kind of throwing different spaghetti at the wall.
I'm not.
Okay.
I asked
Alright.
you a very
I think he's kind of like throwing a bunch of different spaghetti on the wall.
specific question. What is it that you think guides you when you're talking to me to help you determine whether what you say is true?
Logic, memory, reasoning, sensory information.
How do you distinguish that from being governed by something that's false?
It's an interesting question.
How do you know the difference when you speak between what's true and what's false? So you can imagine
Infer, right? I can infer. I
from
can,
what principles?
so, and what are you getting at?
I'm getting at the fact that your conscience guides you. Is that
Okay.
reasonable?
Conscience is defined by
Conscience.
my empathy and my reason, or my
Define
foundational.
it any way you want.
Okay, so that's how I'm defining my conscience. Is my, my conscience is my sense of,
Right and wrong.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
where
Yeah,
does that come?
Yeah, so here's the whole fucking like rigmarole, kind of Jordan Peterson stuff, where he's just like, I'm just gonna ask a bunch of questions, because he's trying to get to like I suppose this is Jordan Peterson engaging in the classic the Socratic method, right? He's engaging in the Socratic method to try to like get at what I suppose Greg here believes. Like, I don't know. Like trying to get down to like the sort of like whole reasoning for as to why this man how he thinks and how he like believes in things is just like, I don't know. I don't really see like where the relevance kind of comes in. I mean, is he gonna get like voted off or something? I don't know. That's like another problem that I have with this particular format is if a thing gets engaged with, a dude can just get like voted off immediately before it's just like, well, I wanted that to fucking finish, dude. But that's like a main criticism of like the sort of format, I suppose.
Come from?
I would say that comes from an evolved capacity to empathize and a recognition of the benefits of engaging with and nurturing that capacity. And then that empathy is constrained and guided by reason, right? Like, for example, I'm driving down the highway, there's a kitten in the road. I'm going to empathetically feel, oh my God, I want to save the kitten, but then reasonably, like, I'm going to get hit by a car, right? So that's sort of the process through which I make ethical decisions.
Okay,
is
how do
being
you,
constrained by reason.
do you think that people can differ in their response to something empathically?
Yeah.
Is there a mediating principle that can tell you one person who's empathic and another person who's empathic that disagree who's correct?
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think that's where we'd have to talk it out, right? We do that in real life all the time when we have, whether it's a discussion with a friend about the right thing to do in a situation, whether that's a policy discussion about law, right? That's where we can converse with each other, think about things, explain our perspectives, and then kind of reach a conclusion, right? I think we do it all the time.
So Elijah, the prophet Elijah, defined God in the Old Testament as the voice of conscience within.
Okay.
That's a definition.
So you're saying by that definition of God, I see this kind of goes back to what I'm saying.
I'm
initially,
not defining it. Elijah
okay,
defined
so
it.
as Elijah defines
It's
God.
defined that way in Jonah too.
Okay, so as
Cardinal Newman also
got
defined
it.
it that
As
way.
I'm sure many people define it that way. And it's impressive. You're a very knowledgeable person.
I'm not trying to be impressive. I'm just pointing out to you how God is defined in the Old
Okay.
Testament.
All right. So to respond to that,
Jordan, just like was brought up fucking earlier, there's a lot of different interpretations of the Old Testament. Boy meets Smitty, how many versions of the fucking Bible exist? How many? Countless? Probably hundreds, if not thousands of versions of the Bible. So, Jordan, you are committing to a particular definition of a particular Bible, right? You just mentioned some people, right? That's the thing. But it depends on the language and the time period. Guys, it's almost as if like basing a lot of like sort of like definitions of like what this all-knowing omnipotent being is Might be kind of hard given all the fucking interpretations of it, especially since it's mostly been interpretations by man that have done it. But well, you know.
I do think there are lots of interesting ways to define God. And that goes back to my
Then
opening
how do we
statement.
specify what we're arguing about?
We use context clues, or again, it goes back to my
I mean, you were just specific in a definition. Okay, whatever.
example,
I'm
the Mona
defining
Lisa.
God as conscience.
Okay, so that's interesting, but then you're kind of expanding the meaning of
No,
God.
I'm not. That's how.
The most canon is the one that one king of England made so that he could. Oh, it's that's King George. That's King George the Eighth, I think, right? I think that's King George the Eighth is what you're referring to there, AJ.
How it's defined in the Old Testament,
Okay,
in
so-
Elijah and in Jonah.
Sure, so whoever, so
It's not whoever. Elijah is one of the major Old Testament prophets. Right? He's equal in stature to Moses.
Okay,
Right, so it's not arbitrary.
All right, so that
Henry
is
the Eighth,
interesting,
thank you.
but it's not relevant to the context with which I'm using the term God.
It's directly relevant. Atheists reject God, but they don't
Right,
understand
but
what they're rejecting.
you're
You
being-
accept conscience as a guide, and conscience is one of the defining characteristics of God in the Old
I
Testament.
think you're being intellectually disingenuous.
In what way?
Because
I
again,
asked you if you believe that conscience
you
guided
just
you.
asked me a question and then you stopped me from answering it. In this setting, you understand the way I'm using the term God and believe.
Not
and
in the
then
least. I don't understand how you're using it in the least. That's why I'm trying to define it. My definition of God as conscience is a lot more
Yeah,
precise
George
and
heads
oriented than your
eyebrows
definition
up,
of God
yeah.
that you
But
hypothetically disbelieve in.
it's irrelevant to the fault lines of this debate.
How is it irrelevant?
Because in common parlance, when we're talking about atheist, God, belief, not belief,
I
we're
don't
not
care
talking
about common parlance. I'm trying to get to something fundamental.
I think your point is irrelevant to the way that people tend
Which
to use
point?
these words. Your point that there are these polysemous
I didn't
ideas
make
of
that
God.
point. You did.
Well,
I made it
So yeah, this is the Jordan fucking Peterson classic. You know, he's trying to get to like a brute fundamental when he doesn't really have to like get like. The dude already talked about how he thinks about and believes in fucking things, you know? But Jordan Peterson doesn't want to say that he actively rejects it because, again, like I said before, he would have to fucking commit to a position. That's the fucking problem. And then guess what? If he commits to a position, like I said before, crazy. Whoa. He would have to answer questions about that position that he's staking a claim on, of which he can't really do. And if he didn't commit to that position, he would lose his evangelical audience. Bingo.
Specific point that God was associated with conscience.
I just feel like you kind of retreat into the semantic fog.
I'm not retreating at all. I'm advancing, sir. You are retreating.
Jordan, you retreat into the fucking goddamn semantic fog all the time. Again, that's how you maintain your fucking audience. Because again, when it comes to Jordan, it's all about audience retention and capture. He's not being very honest here.
Well, it was very nice
Yes,
to
nice
meet
to
you.
meet you too. Yeah, it's very brave of you to do this. My next claim is that morality and purpose cannot be found within science.
Where's Mr. Canada?
How you doing, man?
Morality and purpose cannot be found within science. Why not? Why do you need... Okay, I guess, like, I would sort of attack, like, the opposite of that claim. Why does it have to be found in religion? Right? Why does it have to be found... what he's saying isn't exact. Is not inaccurate, right? It is kind of true. Science is like doesn't really care as much about like morality and purpose. Yeah, you can yes, like you're saying, you can logically justify atrocities, but the thing is like, why do you have to use religion in order to find morality and purpose? Plenty of atheists can find morality and purpose. So, can find morality and purpose without science. I think the term science there is being used as a little bit of a red herring. Like, I don't think it has any relevance at all in terms of, like, morality or purpose. Because, like, for example, I don't know, you can just be like, oh, I believe in these things because I think it is correct to believe in these things because I think it's, like, logically consistent with what I want to produce within the world or some shit. That's like a moral claim, right? You could say, like, I'm for good things and against bad things. You know, that's, like, really, really fucking simplified and, like, stupid. But you can just say that. There's no, like, scientific basis for that claim or whatever. But that's a moral position, you know? You can say, like, oh, I'm for abortion because I am, in favor of a woman's right to choose. That's not, like... founded within science, but it's a moral claim, right? And you can have the purpose of I will fight for abortion rights because of I think like the idea that a woman's right to choose being attacked by evangelicals or whatever or the state, I think is just an unjustifiable thing, right? And that's like a moral claim. There is purpose within that claim, right? That's fine. You can say those things. But, you know, with Jordan, I don't know. I think the term science here is a bit of a red herring, because I don't think you need science to have morality and purpose. But I guess it's like the claim is cannot be found within science. I mean, you can use science to basically like justify a lot of fucking shit, right? I don't know.
You're doing great.
What's your name?
Brian, I think it's interesting that you say that morality and purpose can't be found in science. Actually,
Within science.
sure,
Yeah.
sure. Purpose, I actually grant you, because purpose is subjective, right? Unless you want to boil it down to the purpose of life is just to procreate, right? Sure, whatever. Morality is actually something that we do see. We actually have examples of Neanderthals and older individuals found in the tribe, missing an arm, missing teeth, still alive somehow in his 40s, 50s, right? Typically, you're a Neanderthal, you can't eat, you can't hunt, you die, right? But we know the members of the tribe became care of him, right? So we know that at some level, early in our evolutionary history, we actually developed altruism. We have examples of chimpanzees who actually have a basic understanding of fairness, right? If you give a chimpanzee 2 grapes, right, and his buddy gets right, he actually freak out, right? But you give both chimps 3 grapes and they're good. We have examples of parrots.
Except for the greedy chimps.
Except for the greedy
They
chimps.
want 4 grapes.
They want 4 grapes. You know, those do exist, right? But we have similar examples where we do animal tests, right? And
So morality is intrinsic.
I think
So it precedes science.
I think that actually
right?
a better way to define it would be that social animals, which we are, right, require some level of morality or
Into what? I'm not disagreeing.
Sure.
Why do they require that?
because it's the only way that social groups can actually survive, right?
That's my point with
Sure.
regards to science. Thank you very much.
Is that
Precisely the point that you just made, that science
Did he just say effective altruism? Let me listen to that again. I didn't quite catch that.
right? If you give a chimpanzee 2 grapes, right, and his buddy gets 3, right, he actually freak out, right? But you give both chimps 3 grapes and they're good. We have examples of parrots.
except for the greedy chimps.
Except for the greedy
They
chimps.
want 4 grapes.
They want 4 grapes. You know, those do exist, right? But we have similar examples where we do animal tests, right? And
So morality is intrinsic.
I think
So it precedes science.
that actually
right?
a better way to define it would be that social animals, which we are, right, require some level of morality or
Into what? I'm not disagreeing.
Sure.
Why do they require that?
because it's the only way that social groups can actually survive, right?
That's my point with
Sure.
regards to science. Thank you very much.
Is that
Precisely the point that you just made, that science has to exist within a moral framework that isn't in itself scientific.
how's that not scientific?
Well, because it's not derived from the scientific process, as you just indicated.
It
My
doesn't
point
derive from the
is-
scientific process. It's the fact that
hang on a
we
second.
are social animals and we need that to exist as a group,
I
right?
agree, but
Sure.
you pointed to the morality of Neanderthals, to the morality of chimpanzees. They didn't derive that from science.
Don't need to. That's not
That's
how
my
it works.
point.
Science explains it.
No, science doesn't explain morality.
It doesn't explain how social animals would need to be.
Well, that's
altruistic.
a complicated question.
But we see it though.
Yeah, but explaining the evolution of morality and explaining morality itself aren't the same thing.
Okay, so you're asking why does this happen?
Yes, that's more accurate.
we're social animals, we
Yeah,
need
but there's
to
more
be-
to it than that.
Is there?
Sure. For example, so we're moral animals that have a sense of the future.
Sure.
Okay, that makes us unique, and that structures our morality.
No, actually, there are other animals that can predict the future.
No,
Not
really.
predicting- No, tigers. Actually, there was a tiger at the SFU that killed somebody. And so
many
actually,
animals-
no. Kids threw shit at the tiger. The tiger actually plotted its escape, and it found the
I'm not
kids.
saying that animals can't think.
Okay,
No, but they
let's
can
pause
predict the
here.
future. That's what I'm
Well-
saying.
Voted out by the majority.
Thank you, man.
Good man. Yeah.
I don't know. That didn't really get anywhere. I'll be quite honest. Like, yeah. Animals have morality, I guess, or something? I'm not really sure, honestly.
How are you doing, man?
Luke, nice to
Good
meet
see
you.
you, Luke.
So your claim that morality and purpose can only be found in science is a little shaky because I think that your claim is really being framed to be morality and purpose can only be found in religion. Is that how you're kind of framing it?
I would say that the domain of religion is the domain of morality and purpose. Yes, exactly. And also that science is actually structured, at least in part, technically, to eliminate such.
Yeah, I think that's already like a perfect way to sort of attack this, is because, yeah, Jordan Peterson thinks that morality can only be found within religion. That's the whole fucking thing, right? When that's just not the case, right? I'm not religious, and I just stake the like moral claim on like abortion. Just, you know, random example that I just like came up with, right? And that's a moral claim, you know. You can derive purpose from that, for example, right? So
Such considerations
Random
from its purview
example.
a priori. Right? That's why we define science as value-free. But that has to be wrong because scientists have to prioritize their attention towards something before they can even engage in observation. And that act of prioritization of attention is a value-predicated act. And so I can continue. There's all sorts of things we have to assume about science before it can take place.
Okay, so what I'm specifically pointing out here is about religion in particular, since you yourself are a Christian, right?
That's people debate about that, and I generally don't discuss it publicly.
Okay, I understand. And me myself, I'm a former young Earth creationist fundamentalist.
Oh, yeah.
So I have experience in this. I used to run a TikTok channel directed about apologetics about the Bible, specifically in this type of facet with morality, evolution, and such, and going back and forth with that. So in the Bible, it talks a lot about slavery, right?
Yes.
Yes. So in that, it teaches you how to take care of a slave, rather than saying slavery is wrong. I think
No,
it
it
should
says
say
that in the story of Moses.
that slavery is incorrect. It says
Well,
it's
that's why
immoral.
Moses leads his people away from slavery.
But why does the Bible predicate and tell people exactly how to take care of a slave? Isn't
Well,
that immoral? Wouldn't you say that culturally we've evolved as a species, as he said earlier about empathy?
Yeah, I would say that the reason we evolved, so to speak, away from slavery was because the West was founded on Judeo-Christian morality and the presumption that every person was made in the image of God. And so slavery itself became immoral. And that
okay, this is another fucking thing. This whole fucking Judeo-Christian morality. No, that's not what the West was fucking founded on. It was founded because of a bunch of fucking goddamn... and what Jordan Peterson here means by the West here... This is kind of a big tell here about, like, some of, like, Jordan Peterson's fucking bullshit here. This is a bit of a tell here. He believes in the whole, like, the fucking Judeo-Christian value... I don't know, bullshit? I'll say bullshit. Because I think it's, like, mostly fucking bullshit. No, that's not like how morality is fucking derived from Judeo-Christian values, right? You can fucking derive morality from basically fucking anything, right? It's purely fucking subjective. And this is why I've talked about, like, you know, whoa, the death of fucking subjectivity. Whoa, the Daho mentioned it again. The people can believe in a lot of different things. You know, your average fucking normie, like, if you like, we all know the meme. It's like, we taught this chimpanzee like what the average voter believes, and it fucking shot itself in the head, right? We know the fucking meme, right? The idea that it's just like, I don't know, simply derived only from Judeo-Christian values or ethics or whatever is kind of like, is kind of fucking silly. Is something where I would have a fucking problem with. Because that's not the main fucking arbiter. A lot of it is based off of the Enlightenment, right? A lot of anti-Enlightenment thinkers say it's all Judeo-Christian values. The main sort of arbiter for us to, you know, why the West came into existence, I guess, for like lack of a better term. Why, I don't know, the United States believes in the fucking things it does. Nah, dog. The United States came into existence because a fucking a bunch of settlers came in from either fleeing religious persecution or other reasons. There's a lot of different reasons why the fucking settlers decided to come down into America. It's not because of like some fucking random framework that was a recent advent. Like, when did Judeo-Christian values even become a thing, right? Like, when did this shit even fucking start? Yeah, it didn't emerge as a concept in the 1930s and the 40s. So how the fuck can this be a guiding principle for the fucking settlers? Like, why is this a thing? No, the only reason why the terms Judeo-Christian are often used together is because of evangelicals wanting to justify their doomsday fucking cult with Zionists. That is the fucking point of this. So, because back in the day, Christians have had a lot of disputes with Jews. This is fucking true. Why have a lot of Jews been run out of European countries before? Is because of a lot of like religious fervor and sentiment, sort of like ginned up by the Crusades, for example. Like, I think it was like in 1020 something, there was like a bunch of Jewish exoduses, and they all went to the fucking Holy Roman Empire, and the Holy Roman Emperor said like, okay, we can let you guys stay here if you handle our money for us, because it's bad for Christians to handle money because it's the sin of usury, right? That's like a very bastardized version of the fucking story, right? Of the history there. But very, very fucking simplified. No, it's not about like, you know, Judeo-Christian values as to why America, the foundation of America was fucking made. No, it's because of, well, the British Empire wanted to exploit the Americas for a shit ton of fucking money, and also, well, let's be fucking honest here, for the express purposes of settler colonialism. So no, it's not because of it wasn't founded based off of Judeo-Christian principles. It's silly.
Was established by Protestant Christians in the UK, who then convinced the UK government for 200 years to go to war.
And when you say that this is about the cultural evolution of humans in general, rather than just Christianity,
no, I think it's the flowering of the ideas that were embedded in the biblical texts across long spans of time.
I feel like this is just humans editing based on the cultural evolution.
What do you mean
by
just?
Just?
Yeah, just humans.
Well, humans.
Editing.
Well, based on culture and history, right? We get better.
Well, they did do it based on culture and history, but
yes.
culture and history have their foundations too. So.
Well, yeah, but we're talking about slavery. So many people bolstered it based on the Bible. Based on the Bible. They looked at it and they justified it in the United States and the South. They justified slavery.
Yeah, but the main thrust of Protestant thought in particular was stringently against slavery, and it was about the only movement in the history of the human race that had an anti-slavery direction.
Which was driven by humans and their understanding
of
morality.
Well, it depends.
It's the same with women's suffrage. I mean, women's in the patriarchy.
What do you mean it was driven by humans? Humans drove slavery too.
Yes, exactly.
So there's no argument there. If slavery and anti-slavery were both driven by humans, what does your claim that they were driven by humans have to do with it?
Evolved morality based on the culture that within the society that they live.
Okay,
so with women's suffrage as well
is
is a very similar topic in the Bible. There are denominations in Christianity such as Pentecostal movement which do bolster women to be pastors, right? Which I think that's a great thing to do. But most like to disregard.
Where do you think the idea that human beings were sufficiently equal to all vote and not be slaves came from?
Humans.
Yeah, but so did the idea of slavery.
So did the idea of God.
Fine, but what's your point? Like, you're not making an argument. You're just saying all thoughts come from humans, regardless of the thoughts.
It's not driven by a higher power. It's driven on our experience as humans, which is what is best for all people.
Is it driven by conscience?
Oh man, we love. He's doing the fucking whole rigmarole where he's not fucking engaging with what's being said here, and he's just like, "Well, I need you to like keep defining these things because I can't stick to a consistent position. I can't because if I do stick to any thing that's consistent, well then that means I'd have to actually like defend something. But you know."
It could be. Which conscience is also something that has evolved over time, and I think that's something that does evolve with morality and empathy.
Okay, I don't understand the point that you're making.
My point is that God influenced slavery. People looked at the Bible and went, this is moral because God says so, just like women's suffrage and just like homosexuality.
All human societies were slave owners, so you can't blame that on the Bible.
If humanity decided...
Oh wait, address that first.
What,
all
slavery?
human societies were slavers, so you can't blame that on the Bible.
Well, you can say it bolstered it.
Well, not if you look at the broad sweep of history, because it was the Protestant Christians
Based
in
on
the
their
UK.
interpretation of the Bible.
It was the Protestant
Which
Christians.
evolves over time.
Pause there. You've been voting out with the majority.
Well, it was great talking with you.
Nice talking to you.
Yeah.
So again, it's not like okay. So the whole point on like fucking slavery, no, like a lot of the things that drove slavery. So for example, with the Greeks, you want to know what drove slavery for the Greeks? It's because they had a superior, or like for lack of a better term, like I'm being very crass and crude when I say this. The Greeks basically had a superiority complex. That's why, they did slavery, broadly speaking. That's not like driven by any like particular religion. Like some of them like could justify it based off of like, I don't know, like whatever like pagan fucking tradition or some shit, right? But if we're talking about what the main mode of economy that would have existed during the times of slavery in particular, right? It would have been like mostly master-slave dynamic, right? We didn't really necessarily transition into serfdom at this point, right? This would have been like about what, like 2,000 years ago. So the main sort of like drivers of the economy at this point, if we're doing like the sort of like whole Marxist sort of analysis here, it was mostly master-slave distinctions and didn't really have anything to do with, I don't know, fucking like, I guess some of it could have had like a religious like morality associated with some of it. Like, I mean, the Greeks, like I said before, the only reason why the Greeks like enslaved people was because they had a superiority complex, and they're just like, well, we're just better than everyone else, so that's why we have to have slaves. Haha, very cool, Greece, fantastic. I'm being a little hyperbolic when I say that. So that's the main reason why the Greeks in particular engaged in a lot of slavery practices, is because they thought they were better than everyone else and that their culture was like stronger than everyone else. Stronger? I don't think it's like the best term to really use. The thing is like Jordan's not really sort of engaging with like the sort of like main thing here. I mean, he doesn't really engage with like much of anything, to be honest. The thing is that the main drivers behind slavery during those times, this is where I was going with this, were not like religious affiliations. It was just how the economy was structured at this point. During wartime or during raids or whatever, opposing armies would invade other kingdoms or other empires or whatever, claim their fucking spoils of their war because, like, every culture at that point in time thought they were better than everyone else. And basically, this is, like, very, very highly simplified. And basically, they just thought, like, oh, well, we're built different and we're built better. So, you know what? We're just going to sort of enslave these people in order to have them, benefit our sort of, like, agrarian economies at the time, because that's what mostly like a lot of economies were built off of, like agrarian sort of like a peasant farming economies, or mostly was done by slaves before like serfdom came into existence. This doesn't really have anything to do with religion. This is more of economics of the times.
Peterson?
Good to see you, man.
Pleasure.
What's your name?
Brian. So the first thing I would like to say is I would like to engage in this discussion in a symbiotic manner. I would not like to engage where there is one clear winner and one clear loser. Emotions are activated and ultimately becomes about ego. So I'm just saying I'm really trying to understand your position, and I would just like you to really try to understand my position.
Deal.
Okay, sounds good. With that, if you're saying that morality and purpose cannot come from science, is the opposite of that true, that morality and purpose can only come from God?
That's a way of defining it, yes.
Okay.
That's right, that's good. So I would say that with regard to the first claim, say, atheists don't understand what they're rejecting. Because I would say, by definition, God is the unity upon which moral claims are based. That's a definition, right?
Okay, if there is a God, what is the purpose of life?
Well, in the Christian tradition, the purpose of life is to engage in voluntary, upward, self-sacrifice so that the kingdom of heaven can be established on earth.
So you're trying to make it to heaven and avoid hell.
Yes, that's,
Okay.
a good way of, that's a good way of thinking about
What is
it.
the purpose of heaven? Do you understand?
Well,
so here's the deal.
at
We
minimum,
can
at
get
minimum it's
into
the
it
opposite of endless suffering. How about that?
okay, and so should we not try to achieve infinite suffering on planet Earth? And if we can achieve infinite suffering on planet Earth
You mean
without
avoiding-
God,
you mean avoiding-
avoiding it, if we can do that without God, then does that defeat your claim?
Well, yeah, except that it doesn't. You circumvented my initial definition because I said that by definition.
How does it circumvent his initial definition? Wait, let me listen to that again. I think this guy kind of gets him here pretty good.
I'm really trying to understand your position, and I would just like you to really try to understand my position.
Deal.
Okay, sounds good. With that, if you're saying that morality and purpose cannot come from science, is the opposite of that true, that morality and purpose can only come from God?
That's a way of defining it, yes.
Okay.
That's right, that's good. So I would say that with regard to the first claim, say, atheist
Yes,
statements
because
that
this is
reject these, I
what
would say
Jordan
by definition,
Peterson
God is the unity
probably believes.
upon which moral claims are based. That's
Okay.
a definition, right?
Okay, if there is a God, what is the purpose of life?
Well, in the Christian tradition, the purpose of life is to engage in voluntary, upward, self-sacrifice so that the kingdom of heaven can be established on earth.
So you're trying to make it to heaven and avoid hell.
Yes, that's,
Okay.
a good way of, that's a good way of thinking about
What is
it.
the purpose of heaven? You
Well,
understand? So here's the deal.
at
We
minimum,
can
at
get
minimum
into
it's
an
the opposite
infinite.
of endless suffering. How about
We
that?
can, okay, and so should we not
So it's he thinks it's like it basically would be a paradise. Okay.
try to achieve infinite suffering on planet Earth? And if we can achieve infinite suffering on planet Earth
You mean
without
avoiding-
God,
you mean avoiding-
avoiding it, if we can do that without God, then does that defeat your claim?
Well, yeah, except that it doesn't. You circumvented my initial definition because I said that by definition, God was the unified source of morality. And so if we engage in a moral
When
exercise,
you're talking about morality, though, when you
Yeah, that's like he can't answer that question, right? He can't answer it because what if the solar punk utopia or whatever, like in all the memes, does get achieved and everyone is like happy, right? What if the Star Trek, like, what does Jordan Peterson think of Star Trek, right? He would hate Star Trek, right? Everyone's needs are met. There's no war amongst like factions within the Federation. Most of the wars and attacks that happen come from like outside hostile forces against the Federation, but the Federation pretty much has everything achieved, right? There's no suffering within the Federation, right? There's no everyone's needs are met. If you have a thing that you need, you can just get it, sort of by like the term is like STCs and like 40K, right? Where anything can be like instantaneously made. It's like the 500 cigarettes fucking meme, right? I want 500 cigarettes, and then 500 cigarettes just kind of appear, and the aliens start fucking smoking the cigarettes, right? So like, if this utopia gets achieved, I suppose, doesn't this like completely defeat like Christian morality? Basically, it would, wouldn't it? Pretty sure it would.
really reverse engineer it and you get it down to its root, you're a psychologist, it really seems like it just has to deal with motivation. People are saying there is a God, there
It's
is
more specific than that.
Well, so let me ask you this. So if there is a God and there is a moral code and it doesn't come at your benefit, are you going to follow it?
It depends on how you define your benefit. If you define your benefit,
If it's going to come at your expense, would you still
Define
follow
your
it? If
expense.
God came down and said, here is my moral code and you should follow it, but even if you follow it, you are still going to end up in hell, are you going to follow it?
well, that was the question that was put to Job and to Christ, right? Because they
okay,
were
but-
required.
but
Hang on, I'm
I'm
answering your
asking-
question. They were required to withstand trials that would break anyone and maintain their upward orientation regardless.
And they did that with
Yeah.
the motivation of believing that this omnipotent, all-loving God would somehow turn it into a benefit. So they still did it solely for their benefit. So
No,
when you,
not, well,
yes,
let's
they
define,
did. Yes,
hang
they
on,
did.
hang on.
If-
Let's define benefit. Like, if I did something for your sister, would that be to your benefit? Like, how?
Yeah, you didn't really answer the question there, to be honest, right? Like, he didn't answer. It's like, well, you know, what do we mean by benefit? Like, how is that to your benefit? How is that to anyone's benefit or anything? Because, again, he can't answer the question. He can't answer anything. He just snaked out of it, basically. Brian here fucking got him. Had him by the fucking balls, and he just, like, snaked out of it by not really engaging with the question.
How are you defining your benefit? Do you mean one of your whims gratified now, or do you mean you and everyone you love and know over some reasonable span of time?
So
What do you mean by
when
you?
you're
Time for
talking
some
about whims, I think
fucking
you're talking about
nonsense,
something
I
that's more
guess, now.
dopamine. When you're talking about morality, you're talking about something that's more serotonin and more ultimately satisfying. So you and I agree on a lot. I mean, when it comes to talking about how men should be masculine and things of that nature, you and I are 100% in agreement. We just don't agree on the justification that God is the only thing that provides
It's not
morality.
a justification, it's a definition.
What's the difference in between a definition and a justification? I mean, it's ultimately
No, I see.
psychologically the same thing.
Well, we have to define what we're talking about before we can just debate.
Okay, well,
right?
so
And
here's my
I said
position.
that God, among other
I'm
things,
actually a non-theist. I'm not an atheist. I believe the human condition is one of uncertainty. And what that means is that I don't believe that you can conclude there is a God with certainty, and I don't believe that you can conclude that there is a God without in the same position. Now, with that, I don't care. I still wake up every day, and I have motivation to be a moral person.
define
And
moral.
Moral, what I ought to do.
Okay, how do you
and
come to
what I
that
ought to
conclusion?
do, ultimately, it comes down to what not just benefits me, but what benefits the entire planet, what it benefits the entire system. I think that your entire moral perspective comes from linear thinking, and when you look at the reality of the universe, it's actually more so holistic. So when you look at how Aristotle defined God, when he said that there had to be an unmoved moved or an uncaused cause, he was defining God from a linear perspective, and you do the same with morality, and you do the same with purpose.
How does my
I
definition
reject
of
that.
morality?
Yeah, kind of fucking clocks him here because again, Jordan Peterson's one of the main things about Jordan Peterson is that he has a significant belief in hierarchy. Hierarchy, this sort of justification of like, you know, all these different hierarchies and everything. Very, very linear types of thinking, right? Like, well, you have to have like, I guess in this case it would be the God is the guy on top. If we're talking about like Jordan Peterson in this particular instance, even though he doesn't want to claim to be a fucking Christian now for some fucking reason or some shit, whatever. He's a fucking Christian. He is definitely a fucking Christian. He just doesn't want to fucking commit to the position because then he'd have to defend a bunch of different stuff of Christianity, but that's like a whole different thing of the whole sort of like superposition that fucking Jordan Peterson has to maintain in order to have a fucking audience. So again, Jordan Peterson's whole modus operandi, audience capture, because he doesn't fucking believe in anything. So that's all besides the point. He believes that the God is on the top, right? And it'd be everyone else below him. Sort of how this strata then work out from there, right? He would have probably men over women and differing minorities, mostly like white men, because again, Jordan Peterson's kind of fucking racist, but well, you know, because he's a conservative. Even though, like, don't let him tell you that, you know, don't let him tell you that I said that, you know, because you may have a fucking problem with it and have, like, I don't know, some particular, like, idiotic fucking conspiracy theory about, like, well, you know, I never really said that, like, can you define, like, your terms, or, like, I have kind of a problem when you say these particular things, and it's just like, okay, whatever, then you get into the whole stupid semantical fucking debates and arguments with him, or, like, any of his, like, fucking supporters. Right, the sort of, the hierarchies that Jordan Peterson believes. He believes that God is on top, and then it probably would be men, and then it would probably be everyone else but beneath the men. You know, he's talked about, like, you know, he's done, like, the whole, like, sort of, like, manosphere sort of thing before, right? Like, that was just one of his main claims to fame. Because he thinks in absolute maintenance of control and hierarchy with who on top. He would say God, but in reality, it's men. Because he himself believes in hierarchical maintenance of controls and structure. There has to always be a certain someone on top. So, for example, and this is one of the biggest tells is whenever Jordan Peterson talks about poverty, he thinks that it is okay for people who suffer in poverty. He doesn't care about, like, people suffering in poverty because, again, it's just like, well, they ended up on the bottom of the fucking hierarchy, right? They ended up on the bottom of the hierarchy, and that's a problem. Because, again, for him, maintenance of that hierarchy. He always wants the billionaire or whomever the fuck is on top to be the main person that is on top. That is the point. So when we're talking about, like, his sort of, like, religious justifications and, like, morality here, for Jordan, it's always been about that maintenance of hierarchy, which is why, you know, he overall thinks that, like, he agrees with the sort of, like, sentiment that, like, God is the ulterior conscious of morality and purpose that exists for all humans in the world. Because, again, a first order principle for Jordan Peterson is that he believes in hierarchy. Never forget that.
How does my definition of morality hypothetically differ from yours?
Because you're saying that there's something that exists in a vacuum, that it exists in and of itself. And nothing in the universe exists in a vacuum. Nothing exists in and of itself. It's a whole systems-based morality. It's a systems-based reality.
Is there a hierarchical structure? Is there a hierarchical structure? Are some things more important than others?
I think that some things lead to more benefits than others.
Then, by your own definition, some things are more important than others.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
What is
pause there. You've been voted out by the majority.
That was pretty good. Brian got him there pretty good.
Nice to meet you.
I guess since you said morality and purpose cannot be found in science, it would just depend on like what you're referencing. If you're saying the description of your psychological preferences would be considered within science, sure. But I don't think that you have to say that it comes from science in order to be like an atheist. As an agnostic atheist, I don't know if God exists. I don't believe that God exists. And the only ones I would really reject would be like the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good, perfect notion of God that plenty of Christians just like prescribe themselves. So I
How
guess
is that relevant to this claim?
you're basing a position of morality and purpose in some like notion of God that isn't the same type of notion of God that typical Christians would prescribe. Your notion of God is
What typical Christians?
yeah. Typically, when I talk to Christians, they say that they believe in
How
all-knowing.
about Cardinal Newman, who defined God as conscience? He's a major influence on all of Catholic social theory. How about that Christian?
Sure. So do you believe in the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good notion of God?
What do you mean by believe?
You think it to be true?
That's the
Jordan, why the fuck are you asking? What do you mean by okay, stupid. He's doing the fucking meme again, you know. He's doing the fucking thing where, you know, he can't fucking believe in anything fundamentally, you know. Has to do like the whole like superposition thing where it's like, well, you know, I need you to keep constantly defining your definitions and so I don't have to engage with any of your presuppositions or anything. Yeah.
Circular definition. What do you mean when
How's
you
that
say you
circular?
believe?
How's that circular?
Because you added no content to the answer by substituting the word true and believe.
I said, you think it's true.
All right, so if you believe something, you stake your life on it.
What do you mean by that?
You live for it, and you die for it. That's what I mean by that. It isn't something that you say. It isn't something that's associated with logical consistency. It's not declarative. It's not propositional. It's not a figment of your imagination. It's the presupposition of your attention and your action. And you're either fragmented, in which case you worship multiple gods, or there's some unity at the bottom of it that makes you an unstoppable force.
Okay, so you're saying that you don't believe something if you wouldn't die for it?
Not really, no.
Okay, so
How
then,
would you define belief? Something you say?
okay, so I explain. Like, I could believe it is the case this pen exists, but if someone like threatened my life, right, I would lie in order to be able to save my life, right? Like, I think you would do that too. You wouldn't lie to save
Don't
your
be
life.
so sure.
You wouldn't lie to save your life?
How much do you know about me? I didn't lie to save my career. I didn't lie to save...
Yeah, I think he just got there. Yeah, he just got fucking got there. The idea that you have to, like, believe in everything with your fucking goddamn life in order to justify belief in something is fucking stupid. Well, like, what do you mean? Like, what's the name of the individual here? Fucking got him pretty fucking good there. I can believe that this fucking goddamn bottle here exists. And I mean, if I have to fucking justify and say, like, lie about it in order to, like, survive the belief of this, I don't know, the bottle of nasal spray, I'm gonna do it in order to live because I care about living. I guess Jordan Peterson doesn't care about living now or something. Jordan Peterson believes in his own death. Damn, it be like that sometimes. 07 to a goat, I guess.
Save my clinical practice.
Would you lie, like, save your children, your mom, your dad?
I don't think lying would save them.
Can there ever be a circumstance logically that lying could save someone?
Yeah, and if you're steeped in sin, you're likely to live in circumstances like that.
I'll give you an example. If you're like in like Nazi Germany, and it's the case that there's like Jewish people in your attic, and you're trying to
I know
protect
the
them, would you lie to like the Nazis?
I would have done everything I bloody well could, so I wouldn't be in that situation to
lie?
begin with. It's a hypothetical, and it's
You
not
can't answer
answerable.
hypotheticals?
That's Jordan. He can't answer the question because he probably believes in fascist ideology. He's okay with the Nazis. So he can't ever fucking answer this question because of his audience. So he's never going to answer this fucking question, ever. Like, what do you mean by, I would do everything possible to not be in that situation? Okay, sure. Like, let's say, hypothetically speaking, it's the Weimar Republic. You are witnessing the rise of the fucking Nazi party, right? You want to join the, like, would Jordan Peterson join the paramilitary groups that the, like, the SDF had or something? Or, like, the not the SDF, or the fucking SPD had, or the communists had, the not NKVD, the MPD. Would Jordan Peterson do that in order to try to, like, stop the rise of the Nazis? I don't think he would, because I think Jordan Peterson would be okay with the rise of the Nazis. Just saying.
No, I can't answer a hypothetical like that because it's
Did you
far. Look,
Did you
don't
eat
play
that?
games.
Stop playing games.
Yes,
Stop
you
playing
are. If you present me with an intractable moral choice that's stripped of context and you back me into a corner, you're playing game. I just told you, I would do everything that I could to make sure that I'm never in that situation. By the time you've got...
Like, again, what the fuck does that even mean? Like, would he run away from Germany? Okay, you will probably get easily fucking caught or some shit by, I mean, more than like, I don't think, like, Jordan Peterson would be the type of dude who'd be a fucking Nazi collaborator. Let's be fucking honest here. Like, let's not fucking play any fucking games. Like, what if you are poor, right, and you can't get out? That's something that can very easily happen. What if you just don't have the means to get out? Like, is his, like, counter argument to this just move, forehead? Is that what he's going with? Just move? That's pretty fucking weak, I'll be honest.
Out there, you've made so many mistakes that there's nothing you can do that isn't a sin.
Being born in Nazi Germany and trying to protect people that you care about, like, there could be a Jewish friend that you have, and you want to protect them.
I think you should
have
just
them
give up
in
on
your
that line of questioning.
Give up on just, like, trying to clarify your position? Because
I
you don't,
did
like, are you, like,
clarify.
uncomfortable with me asking this question? It's just a basic hypothetical. Like, I could ask
It's
you.
just a basic
yeah,
hypothetical.
like,
where you're,
if
if Jews' lives at stake in Nazi Germany, that's just a basic
obviously, you
hypothetical.
would lie in that scenario to save their life, but you're, like, not trying to answer this question
What's
for
wrong?
some reason.
I just told you why.
Are you anti-fascist? Let's say
Why
you're
are you
anti-fascist.
asking that?
I was just asking, just clarifying. But, like,
He's not anti-fascist. He's pro-fascism. I have bad news. He's pro-fascism. He's okay with fascism because, again, Jordan Peterson's whole shtick, Maintenance and control of hierarchy. What is the first intonation of all fascists? Oh, maintenance of hierarchy and control of hierarchy. Crazy. So, yes, Jordan Peterson would be okay with fascism.
Again, you're not answering this hypothetical because you know it shows that you clearly would lie to say
I'm answering it in a manner you don't find acceptable.
Obviously,
Because I wouldn't be in that scenario.
Obviously.
Well, because you're not, like, that's not a good enough answer. Like, sometimes some things are just completely unavoidable, Jordan. That's life. I thought we cared about, like, I don't know, like, rules to life. Some things are just unavoidable. Like, being born in Nazi Germany. Sometimes there's nothing you can do about that one. It's just like, well, shit. I was born here. I can't do anything about that. Like, sucks to suck.
Right, logically, because that's already happened. Like, that's in the past. You don't have time to travel device. Where you bring this logical hypothetical up to show you that in some circumstances that do happen within the real world, you would lie to save people's lives. So your definition of truth isn't actually how we're typically using it. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to muddy the waters. When I ask you, like, do you believe this? Do you think this to be true? So you don't actually have to answer the questions. And plenty of Christians don't like that because they clearly see that you don't really want to be associated with
I can
Christianity.
imagine that I was in a situation where the best I could do as a consequence of my previous mistakes was to tell the least amount of lie I could manage.
Yeah, and like, here's the thing about that. Like, it's really telling that the first thing that Jordan Peterson has to immediately fucking complain about is his fucking career. Because, again, why did Jordan Peterson lose his tenure at University of Toronto and lose his psychology fucking his job as a psychologist? Because he revealed confidential information about a patient. That's why. And the board saw it fit to remove his license because of that. That's why Jordan Peterson is particularly triggered about this.
But that would likely indicate that I had made all sorts of catastrophic errors on my way there.
So you would lie to save someone's life. So again, you do believe it to be true in that circumstance, even though you lied in that scenario. So
Like, again, like, oh, well, you know, I would lie. I can't just lie because, again, he would have to commit to a position. He can't commit to anything because if he commits to something, again, like I said, he won't be able to maintain his dumbass fucking superposition of believing in everything and nothing at the same time.
Not without the context that I put it in.
you were not willing to die for it. You're not willing to let other people die for it. So that's not what you see to be true then, seemingly.
You're doing exactly what I said you were doing at the beginning of the conversation. You're generating an impossible, restricted, hypothetical, with no precursors to back me into a
How's it
corner.
possible? Is there something contradictory about it? Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Yeah. My next claim is that every
Yeah, I think he got pretty there. He got pretty good there. He can't answer it because, again, Jordan Peterson is a fascist. He is a fascist. He believes in maintenance of hierarchy first and foremost. That is a very fascist fucking belief. This is also the same fucking dude, by the way, who has, like, apparently, and this is by his words, a bunch of, like, communist fucking memorabilia all up in his fucking house as, like, a constant, like, reminder of, like, who his, like, true enemies are. You know, he's a very, very, he's a very ill man.
worships something, including atheists, even though they might not know it.
Hi.
Good work.
Thank you.
Hi there.
I'm Zena. So I want to start off with like defining terms.
Yep.
How do you define worship?
Prioritize.
Prioritize. So almost like having a preference over something other than the
It's a
other.
hierarchy of preferences.
Yeah.
And use it to direct your attention.
Right.
So whatever you're.
This is. I hope Zena fucking catches on this. I don't know how much she knows about Jordan Peterson, but Jordan Peterson might have done a little bit of a slip up there because that's, again, like I said before, Jordan Peterson's whole modus operandi, maintenance of hierarchy and control. That's his whole fucking shtick. So, you know, because of the sort of baggage with what a position like that entails, he's gonna he constantly loves to like waffle about with like any of his debate opponents at all fucking times. So, you know, believes in nothing. But if there is one thing that he really fucking actually believes in, it's who is on top in like particular relationships. That's what he really believes in.
Attending to your worshiping.
Right. So I've kind of become a little bit familiar with your idea of like this value-laden hierarchy,
Yeah.
right? And you kind of posit that at the bottom of this hierarchy, or you call it top or bottom,
Yeah,
I suppose.
right.
At the bottom of this hierarchy, this foundational priority in your life is going to be considered God.
That's
Is that
correct. Yes.
Right. I'm trying to imagine a situation in which could there be that someone has a priority at their foundation that is different from someone else's?
Oh, definitely.
Right. So we can have different conceptions of God.
That's why we fight.
Right. So essentially, there's not one God, but there are multiple gods, and these gods exist in some realm of truth. Like it's true that this person has one God and it exists.
Yeah, probably better to think about it as multiple values, but that there's a hierarchy of values with something at the bottom.
Right, but the
Or
bottom is
top.
God, and there
That's
are
a definition. Yeah.
Yeah. So the bottom is God,
Yeah.
and there can be multiple people with different conceptions of God, and they're each valid in being called God. So there are multiple gods that exist.
It depends on what you mean by valid. So far, so good, but it depends on what you mean by valid, because I would say that some foundational conceptions don't play out when they're implemented. So if you put the wrong thing at the foundation, you end up in hell, for example. That's what happens in totalitarian states.
Okay.
Yeah?
So you're
So
saying
they're not all equal. Like all foundational principles are not equal, even though they might be equally foundational. Right.
So what makes one kind of foundational tenet like better than another one?
That's an excellent question. iterability. Imagine that you play a game with someone and you're a kid, and it's fun. So then you play again and again and again.
So religion.
It's playability across multiple iterations. So then you have a friend. A friend is better than having a game, right? So that's one. Breadth of application is another. So if it's just for me now, it's not as good as something that would be benefit to both of us across time.
Right. So we're explaining like characteristics that can be applied to like these types of like foundational values. But why is it that this iterability makes it better, and what does better mean?
Well, one hallmark of better is likely to be selected voluntarily. So
Right.
it's invitational.
Another descriptive kind of quality. So we're talking about characteristics that in some type of system with a goal and output being like, we could maybe say happiness, right? Or some type of
Harmony.
Harmony.
Yeah,
right?
that's better. Not happiness precisely because it's too short term.
Exactly. So as someone who is an atheist, right, I can explain that within a system, there are things that we can see as better or worse to meet this goal or meet this output. But what we're interested in, though, is what could make these things, regardless of any system, right?
Well, imagine that you set up a system and you implement it, and it produces the opposite results to which you intend. Okay, that's not a good system.
Exactly.
Right, so the foundational principles are lacking because when you implement them, the game degenerates instead of moving towards the aim.
Right. So we're talking
Okay.
about within a system. When we talk about something being moral, right, just absolutely moral, it means that without a system, right, this thing is simply moral with no reason. Like, stands independent, this thing is good. So I'm trying to figure out if such thing can exist. And if so, do you believe that these things are moral in of themselves, like self-evidently moral, or are they moral in accordance with the system?
I can't define them any more accurately than I already did, really.
Okay. In regards to morality, when we talk about the divine, when we talk about
Yeah, I don't know. Jordan Peterson postmodernism arc. it's you know, I don't know.
God and religion, these moral tenets and religion, right, and God exist as good because it is God, right? So it's self-evident, right? Without any kind of goal or output, this thing is good. So I want to figure out how.
There's an element of that that's true. So, for example, in the story of Job, Job is unfairly tortured in consequence of a bet between God and Satan. So Job is emblematic of someone who's being hurt for no apparent reason. Okay, so Job's response to that is that he refuses to lose faith in himself, and he refuses to lose faith in the ultimate goodness of being. Okay, and those are axiomatic decisions. They're not exactly evidence dependent because he is suffering. There's an arbitrariness in that that's reminiscent of what you claim.
So I'm essentially trying to figure out, do you believe that something can be good, like stance independently, something that can be good?
I don't know what you mean by stance independent.
so I
You mean
mean-
independent of people?
Independent of people, we can use that, or more so, I want to be more specific. Something that can be good, right, regardless of any end goal. It's just good.
No, I think good is tied up with goal.
Goal, okay, I completely agree. So in a sense, this is why.
That's why the religious goal in Christianity is the establishment of the kingdom of heaven on earth. It's goal dependent.
Okay, right.
So it's in reference to a goal.
So
or the goal would be the
but
imitation of Christ.
someone's goal, right, can be something that doesn't encompass being in congruence with God or being with God.
No, the thing that they want to be in
Oh,
congruence.
right, okay, sorry.
That's right.
Sorry,
That's right. That's good. That's
sorry.
great. The thing they want to be in congruence with is fundamentally equivalent to their
So
God.
what makes someone a Christian and what makes someone not a Christian? What makes, like, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
That's a good question.
Yes.
Yeah, well, probably the deepest answer to that is willingness to shoulder your cross voluntarily and trudge uphill regardless of circumstances.
Okay, so someone can believe in, someone can have a God, because in your definition, your first preference, that is God, right? So someone can believe in God, right, and not be a Christian, right?
Yeah, well, there's a statement that Christ makes in the Gospels. He says, not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven.
So not that they're even saying that they believe in God, but they
I
just,
know, but that's why I'm saying this to you, is that Christ himself points out that there's a difference between people who say they believe and people who act it out. And the fundamental issue is the action rather than the stated belief.
but he also says that, you know, to be saved, right, you must believe God has died for your sins, or that God has resurrected in some way. So it's like, I don't necessarily think that we can take from the Bible and say that, like, acting in accordance with God necessarily means, or acting in accordance with, you know, principles of God, the principle of sacrifice that you talk about, means that you are Christian. I don't see how you can get that from that interpretation and then
Yeah, this is that's like a belief that it's consistent in all Abrahamic religions, right? Boy meets many. Like, there's no inconsistency there, right?
you know, kind of justified as.
I don't think that the fact that you sacrifice is sufficient to make you Christian.
So can we repeat once again what you believe makes someone Christian?
There's many things, but one of the most fundamental is that you believe that the cosmos itself is founded on the principle of voluntary self-sacrifice. Best founded. Let me offer you a contrary example. So I could assume that power rules. And so that my assumption would be, if I can make you do it, I win. Right? And I can found a whole society on that. And that happens a lot, by the way. And that's also how societies tend to degenerate. And so that would be a society that was founded on the principle that you get to sacrifice and I don't have to. Right? Now, the contrary to that would be something like, you give up voluntarily and with courage.
Wouldn't Jordan Peterson be okay with a society like that? Because again, his whole shtick is about maintenance of hierarchy. Yes, with slight differences. Okay. Like, Jordan would be okay with something like that because again, his beneath all the fucking bluster in him, like espousing, generally speaking, like not much of I don't know, anything generally speaking. He believes in hierarchy. Like that is something that he definitely fucking believes in. Maintenance of control and hierarchy. Under whose hands? Well, generally under the hands of men. If I, like, you know. And he can, like, do, like, the whole, like, spiritual, like, moral, like, religious justifications about it. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. Again, it's more about, like, who has maintenance within a system of control and hierarchy.
All the things you need to situate yourself properly in relationship to the future and other people.
Right.
So then there's a harmony. That's why I talked about harmony earlier.
So you navigate your life, right, in accordance to this principle of self-sacrifice. Can I say it in that way?
Yes, you can definitely say it that way. That's exactly right. And navigate is the right
So
term.
someone does not have to have any awareness of Christ, of the story of Jesus, and but let's say 60% of their actions, right, or more, whatever kind of measure you want to use, are in line with this
So the
self-sacrifice.
the Christian thinkers of the Middle Ages dealt exactly with that problem when they were talking about the pre-Christian philosophers, for example. And they noted the similarity, let's say, between pre-Christian Greek thought and later Christian thought, and presumed that there were moral actors outside the Christian domain.
Right.
They're
So is that
addressing
person
this-
Christian, though? Is that person
Well, to some degree, again, that's a matter of definition, because they wouldn't be proclaiming Christian propositions, but they're acting out the pattern. Right? So,
Christianity.
yeah, so imagine that full Christianity would involve a dozen things, and you can imagine someone who knows nothing of Christianity, say, acting out 8 of them.
Right.
So then they'd be 8/12 Christian or something like
8/12
that.
Christian.
Well,
but to be like a full Christian, how can someone say I am Christian? Like I am Christian, not 8/12, but Christian.
well,
don't understand.
I hesitate to do that personally because I think it's the kind of goal that you be very careful about proclaiming. The
But
technical.
belief is not necessarily, to be mostly Christian, belief is not necessary.
Well, I mean, again, yeah. Sure, we're trying to see if, like, Jordan Peterson believes in a thing. But, well, like I said before, he never complained that he fucking has a fundamental... He can't stake a belief in anything because, again, like... He has to believe in nothing in order to maintain his, like, position that he just wants hierarchy. Like, that's all he wants.
8/12s or, you know,
Well, it depends on what you mean by belief. Because I would say that acting out the pattern is the deepest form of belief. Now, you could add to that what you say. So, maybe in the optimal situation, how you act and what you imagine and what you say, they're the same, right? But you can imagine a hypocrite who says all sorts of wonderful things and does nothing, and you can imagine another person who acts in a very positive manner but proclaims nothing.
So what I'm kind of seeing is like a descriptive, a really comprehensive, but descriptive analysis of human action, human thought, and by which we can characterize people and put people in boxes. But I don't see...
Why in boxes?
Like, when I say boxes, I mean, like, I can categorize you based on your actions, not based on necessarily what you say, but based on your actions that you're more so or less so Christian, right? Things like that, right? So we can categorize people as Christian.
Well, I would say more or less voluntarily self-sacrificing.
Yeah, but that's also what we came to, though, is that someone can be like 60% or 70% Christian based on simply just acting that way.
Richard Dawkins is like that.
I watched that today.
Pause there. You've been voted out by the majority.
Very good.
Thank you so much.
Really, very thoughtful.
Okay. Meh.
Hey, Dr. Peterson.
How are you doing?
Danny, nice to meet you.
What's your name?
Danny.
Danny.
You're saying atheists worship things or people or places, whatever. Can
Danny.
you be very clear about your definition of worship again?
Attend to, prioritize, and sacrifice for.
Okay, that's it. That's your understanding of worship.
Well, I can flesh it out, but that'll do for the time we have.
Okay, do Catholics attend to Mary?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so do they fit that description of worship?
Yes.
So you would say Catholics and other people that revere Mary, like the Eastern Orthodox tradition, worship Mary.
Well, they might not put her in the highest
But you would
place.
put it that way.
No.
You just said it. You're taking it back
There's
now.
still a hierarchy.
Okay, there's a hierarchy, but within
There's
the
something at the top.
All right, you can worship
Mary's
below.
trying to raise up the hierarchy, but not at the top.
Let's discover your definition of worship again. What's your definition of worship?
Attend to,
Attend to. Do
prioritize,
Do Catholics
sacrifice for.
What do Catholics attend to? Do they prioritize Mary over all other human beings?
No, I didn't say overall, did I? I didn't
Well,
add that to
you
my
under- you
definition.
understand-
I said there was a hierarchy as
You-
well.
you attend
so you
to
can attend to something trivially, or you...
Because, again, listen, yeah, this is... I think this is the guy that Jordan Peterson gets pissed with, right? I was showing at the beginning, right? Because this does fit in line with what Jordan Peterson's fucking definition is, but there's a catch. Mary's a woman, and Jordan Peterson, he's not too fond of women.
You can attend to it deeply.
And now you're adding stuff to the definition. But your original
I added
definition.
the hierarchy part at the beginning.
Are you
just
familiar?
didn't understand
Are you
it.
familiar with the Immaculate Conception?
Why is that relevant?
Wait. He did add the hierarchy part, right? Well, his definition of to worship something is to what? To sacrifice.
So do they fit that description of worship?
Yes.
So you would say Catholics and other people that revere Mary, like the Eastern Orthodox.
What's your name?
Danny.
Danny.
You're saying atheists worship things or people or places, whatever. Can you just be very clear about your definition of worship again?
Attend to, prioritize, and sacrifice for.
Attend to, sacrifice for, and what?
Or places, whatever. Can you just be very clear about your definition of worship again?
Attend to, prioritize, and sacrifice for.
Contend to, prioritize, and sacrifice for. And then he tries to, like, do the fucking gotcha bit, saying, like, well, you just didn't understand that I did mention hierarchy there. And it's just like, is there a mention of hierarchy? You just said, like, broad sort of general terms there, Jordan. That doesn't necessarily have to intend hierarchy. Do you have to sacrifice to maintain a hierarchy? I guess, like, the main people, like, the people below in the totem pole of the hierarchy, I guess they technically have to sacrifice. I guess that's technically speaking correct, but not really.
Okay, that's it. That's your understanding of worship.
Well, I can flesh it out, but that'll do for the time we have.
Okay, do Catholics attend to Mary?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so do they fit that description of worship?
Yes.
So you would say Catholics and other people that revere Mary, like the Eastern Orthodox tradition, worship Mary.
Well, they might not put her in the highest
But
place.
you would put it that way.
No.
You just said it. You're taking it back
There's
now.
still a hierarchy.
Okay, there's a hierarchy, but within
There's
the
something at the top.
All right, you can worship things
Mary's
below.
trying to raise up the hierarchy, but not at the top.
Let's discover your definition of worship again. What's your definition of worship?
Attend to,
Attend to. Do
prioritize,
Do Catholics
sacrifice for.
What do Catholics attend to? Do they prioritize Mary over all other human beings?
No, I didn't say overall, did I? I didn't
Well,
add that to
you
my
under- you
definition.
understand-
I said there was a hierarchy as
You-
well.
you attend
so you
to
can attend to something trivially, or you can attend to it deeply.
I mean, now you're adding stuff to the definition, but your original
I added
definition.
the hierarchy part at the beginning.
Are you
just
familiar?
didn't understand
Are you
it.
familiar with the Immaculate Conception?
You didn't add it to the beginning, Jordan Peterson. What to contend to prioritize, and to sacrifice. That has nothing to do with hierarchy. That's got nothing to do with fucking hierarchy, right? I guess, like, if you want to, like, I don't know, like, further bastardize any of, like, the definition of, like, hierarchy is, I guess you can say, like, well, you know, it is about, there is the definition there of hierarchy, because you need to prioritize the men on the top of the hierarchy. That's the point, right? Like, that's like the fucking meme, right? Silly.
Why is that relevant?
Because you go to a Catholic church. I'm sure you've attended recently. You're interested in Catholicism, aren't you?
Sure.
All right. Are you familiar with their doctrines?
Somewhat.
Okay. You're
Their
familiar.
doctrines are
How
very
do they regard Mary?
Why are you asking me that?
Because you're a Christian.
You say that. I haven't claimed that.
Oh, what is this? Is this Christian versus atheist?
I don't know.
You don't know where you are right now.
Don't be a smartass.
Well,
And I mean,
either you're a
'cause I
Christian
won't
or you're
talk to
not.
you if you're a smartass.
Oh, either you're a Christian or you're not. Which one is it?
Yeah, this is the bit. He's got him by the balls here, right? Because, like, again, what he actually believes in is maintenance of hierarchy. He will use any sort of vehicle in order to have that particular maintenance, or that sort of, like, in order to not have that maintenance, but to quite literally just have that fucking definition there. Again, like, what did this used to be called? This used to be, what? It's now Jordan Peterson versus 20 atheists. It used to be one Christian versus 20 atheists, featuring Jordan Peterson. So again, like, Danny's fucking clocking him here. Pretty fucking bad. He's getting cooked here by my man.
I could be either of them, but I don't have to tell you.
You don't have to tell me. I was under the impression I was invited to talk to a Christian. Am I not talking to a Christian?
No, you were invited to.
I think everyone should look at the title of the YouTube channel. You're probably in the wrong YouTube video.
You're really quite something. You are.
He's so mad. It's because, again, you know, Jordan Peterson, he's getting fucking clocked right on the fucking head. He's a dude that doesn't really believe in anything except one thing. Just maintenance of hierarchy and fucking control. That is the only thing that Jordan fucking believes in. Yeah, he's getting real triggered right now.
Aren't I? But you're really quite nothing, right? You're not a
Okay,
Christian.
I'm done with him.
Yeah. Perfect. And that's how you should treat Jordan Peterson. With just utter fucking contempt. Because he doesn't believe in anything. He doesn't believe anything. He's just trying to say whiff waffle with this, like, definition of, like, Christianity or anything. In order to sort of, like, say, like, oh yeah, you know, I definitely believe in, like, I don't know, like, Christian morality or anything. And all this fucking bullshit. Nah, You don't believe in shit. I'll be honest, like, I don't even know if, like, I need to really go into anything else. This is pretty much, like, the point I wanted to reach. Where he just got triggered. He just got fucking mad. Because, again, he got clocked perfectly. Jordan Peterson, it is a necessity for you to just... You have to fucking believe in absolutely nothing. Because, again, for you to maintain the positions that you have, or, like, not really fucking talk about anything, like, solidly or consistently, you have to fucking, have some kind of belief to defend literally anything. But again, he can't do it. He just can't bring himself to literally defend anything, right? He was called out for being a Christian, and he got fucking mad about it, because he doesn't know if he's actually, like, a fucking Christian. I don't know if even Jordan Peterson knows, like, what he is at this point. I think Jordan Peterson, just, like, it's like I've said before, it's all the fucking sort of, like, ideological, like, soup and superposition, where it's just like, well, I believe in everything and nothing, and I believe in absolutely everything and nothing, and maybe something, and all these things all at the same time, because I need to fundamentally believe in these things, because, yeah. Fucking got him, dude. They fucking got him. And he got real triggered.
Gerard.
Hello, Gerard.
Nice to meet you, sir. So you said that worship is when you prioritize and sacrifice for something, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a hierarchy in there.
Sure. So I prioritize and sacrifice for my wife more than I would prioritize and sacrifice for a random person on the street.
Yeah, again, he's adding the hierarchy bit there because, you know, he's mad that he got fucking caught.
Right?
Probably. Yeah.
Presumably. Do I
I
worship
don't know.
my
I've
wife?
seen some pretty bad marriages.
Assuming a good marriage, are you saying I worship my wife?
I'm trying to define worship.
That's what I'm asking. So prioritize and sacrifice. I do
The
those
higher it
things.
is in the hierarchy, the more what you're doing is akin to worship. But even in your trivial acts of attention, you're prioritizing and partaking in worship, even if you don't know it.
So I am
and it's partly, well, with regard to your wife's sake. So why do you value your wife? You do value your
Yes,
wife.
I love her, so I prioritize and I sacrifice for her.
Right. So that's within the confines of love, let's say.
Sure.
What else does it serve?
What else does what serve?
Your love in your marriage?
I mean, I'm married to my wife because I love her. That's also why I prioritize and sacrifice for her. I certainly wouldn't think I worship her, and I don't think anyone else would make that
I'm trying to
argument.
make a definition.
Okay.
Yeah, that there's a hierarchy of attentional priority, and as you move up it or down it, depending on whether you think about it as a pinnacle or a foundation, you move more towards worship. Right. So even the small things. I'll give you an example. Imagine you go on a date. Well, imagine that your aim is a long-term relationship like a marriage. Okay, now imagine that your aim is short-term sexual gratification. Your pattern of attention is going to vary during the date, depend on your ultimate end.
Okay.
That's the hierarchy. The way that you attend to your wife is dependent on your ultimate
I
end.
love my
even if you
wife
don't know it.
tails.
So at what point is it worship? Because it sounds like you're saying worship is almost a spectrum, right? Or it's not a binary. It's not a.
It's kind of like that's a good
So
question.
when,
It's like
when is it worship as opposed to just I love my wife?
the closer you get to the top or the bottom, the more it's more.
Tails,
like
I love
Because
my
I
wife.
don't think I worship anything. And if you're saying I have to hit a certain threshold for it to be worship, it is possible I don't worship anything then, right?
It's not possible that you don't worship
do
anything
I worship?
because you wouldn't attend a love.
So I can think I
apparently.
worship love.
Do you attend in consequence of love? See, I'm trying to define something. What do you mean worship? I told you what I meant. What do you mean?
So I mean, something you worship is something that you have a reverential view for in a manner in which you believe it to be above and beyond normal things you like. Like you.
So do you have that attitude towards your wife?
I have that.
Do you privilege her compared to other women?
Of course, I privilege her compared to other women, but I don't worship her. Nor does she worship me.
By the definition you just offered, yes, you do. Because you just offered a definition that involved prioritization and elevation.
And thinking that she is divine above and beyond what a normal natural phenomenon can be. Not other women, no, beyond any human being could ever be. I will prioritize her over.
So you're making the
So what Gerard is doing here is he's operating, I think, under the sort of like religious definition of what worship is supposed to be, right? But I don't think Jordan's not gonna answer that question, right? Because he can just do the whole fucking like stupid Weasley bit the whole time. But yeah, this is gonna be kind of a wash.
You're making the assumption that only the thing at the top or the bottom has anything to do with worship, and I'm saying that's not true. It's a hierarchy of prioritization, and there's either something at the top or the bottom, depending on the metaphor, or you're fragmented and confused. Those are the only options.
So
you're either going in many directions, or you're going in one direction.
So let's suppose I'm fragmented and confused. Then you agree I don't worship anything.
No, then you worship multiple things.
So what's the threshold when it's worship? I prioritize a lot of stuff.
I said the closer you get to the pinnacle, or the closer you get.
Can you give me some sort of metric? How close do I got to get to this pinnacle?
Do you know the difference between cheap literature and deep literature?
Yes.
Okay, that's the same issue. And how do you distinguish between them? What's the difference between cheap and deep?
I mean, it's really an opinion-based thing, right?
So it's just an opinion that Dostoevsky is better than a porno magazine.
Well, I've spoken to people who think To Kill a Mockingbird's cheap. It's one of my favorite books. So I mean, people will differ on
Well,
opinion.
just because people are stupid about things doesn't mean that their opinion is valid.
That's certainly true.
Let me ask you. Okay, well, do you think there is a hierarchy in literary quality?
I think that there is a hierarchy to an extent in literary quality, but I think once you get to a certain threshold, it is just opinion. Like I agree, Dostoevsky is better than a porno mag, but is F. Scott Fitzgerald better than Ernest Hemingway? I don't know.
Yeah, fair enough. Why do you think that?
Because of what a book is, what literature is. Dostoevsky, he follows what literature is the purpose of more than the porno magazine.
Okay, good. Well, so let me. Yeah, sure. Let me give you an analog then. The depth of worship is analogous to depth of literary significance, and the closer you get to
I don't know, Boy Meets Minnie. This is just kind
maybe
of.
you don't know what's at the bottom, but something needs to be oriented to.
So use your analogy then. How deep do I have to go for it to be worship? Do I have to be Petra in the Ride? Do I have to be War and Peace? Or
depends on what you're seeking for.
I'm seeking to know whether I worship them. You claimed I worship something.
If you want to have a deep and meaningful life, then you have to go all the way to the bottom or the top, and insofar as you're capable of doing that, because otherwise you'll be fragmented and miserable and anxiety-ridden and hopeless.
So I have to worship something to have a meaningful life.
There's no difference between those two things.
Okay.
They're the same thing.
So if I don't worship anything in my life,
Wait, but you just said, Jordan, that you have to worship. Okay, whatever.
life will not be meaningful, correct?
Well, that's the definition of nihilism.
Okay, so if I'm a nihilist, I don't worship anything.
That's true, and then you.
Okay. You just said everybody worships something. I think you just agreed there's a class of people who doesn't.
Well, they're incoherent in their worship, and hand gestures like that aren't going to help.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Look, if you're incoherent and fragmented and aimless, which is what happens if your objects of worship are unstructured and chaotic, then you're going to be anxiety-ridden and without hope. That happens. That's a technical argument.
But there's happy nihilists.
Oh, there are.
How do you explain that there are happy nihilists then?
Well, the mere fact that you state that there are happy nihilists doesn't make it true. Like, what's your evidence? How do you measure nihilism, and how have you associated it with happiness? And what's your definition of happiness? Have you compared them to religious people?
How do you know that fucking nihilists aren't fucking happy then, Jordan? Like, why would you bring this up to be... It's silly!
Because if you do, by the way, it's clearly the case that religious people over the long run have better mental health. It's a well-documented fact in psychological literature.
Sure.
So your claim is just a claim. It doesn't stand on anything.
So you disagree with the claim that there exists even one happy nihilist?
I didn't say that.
Okay, would you agree there exists at least one happy nihilist in the universe?
It's not a question that has any meaning as far as I'm concerned, because it depends on what you mean by happy, and it depends on the duration that you're trying to calculate over. Now and then there's probably some deluded soul who thinks he's a nihilist who's momentarily pleased with himself. But as a long-term strategy to deal with the future, to get along with yourself and with others, it's sadly lacking. That's why Nietzsche warned that when God died, as he announced in 1850, that people would be flooded with pointless, anxiety-ridden, hopeless nihilism. And that was what would attract them to, for example, to the false gods of totalitarianism, which is exactly what happened. Because everybody worships something, even atheists who think they don't.
Aren't there unhappy Christians or devoted believers? So worshipping something is neither sufficient nor necessary for happiness then?
Well, terrible things can come your way regardless, and that does happen. But it's the case that even when circumstances become deeply troublesome, that how you're oriented makes a big difference. So I'll give you an example. So the book of Job deals with the issue of unfair suffering. So Job is a good man who has everything taken away from him in the most painful possible way.
To settle that, right?
With Satan, yes. And so he makes the axiomatic presumption that he won't lose faith in himself or in the spirit of being itself. And that helps him remain calm and forward-looking through his time of trial.
Doesn't he absolutely curse God?
No, his wife tells him to do that. Yeah, good. My final claim is that atheists accept Christian morality, but deny the religion's foundational stories.
So atheists accept Christian morality, but deny its fundamental stories? Okay, sure.
Hi there.
It's very nice to meet you. I'm Ian.
Hi, Ian.
Yes. So God says that you can own people as property. He says that you can beat them with a rod too. He commands genocide in Deuteronomy and in Numbers and in Samuel. I mean, they have a goddamn baby barbecue in Numbers. Like, is all of this in line with Christian
baby
ethics?
barbecue?
No.
So then God doesn't fit within Christian ethics.
Well, the biblical library is a continuing story, and everything written in it has to be contextualized by the entire text. There's 65,000 hyperlinks in the biblical text. You can take pieces of it out of context and criticize them, and that's what you're doing. But that's a mistake. I think it's an analytic mistake because you're putting the cart before the horse.
I really don't think so. I think that if we say that something is Christian ethics, then I think that all of the...
Is this true, Boy Meets Minnie? Or are like is this like kind of just hyperbolic or something? I know there is definitely genocide that happens within the Bible, right? Like people get fucking killed within the Bible very often. a lot of wacky shit that happens in the Bible, right? This true.
Books essential to Christianity would fit with it, especially if it's like the main character. When we're talking
How do you deal
about
with the
God.
morality of war?
So,
how do you think you should deal with the morality of war?
Sure. Because I feel like the morality, like I feel like Christian ethics, like this is kind of, I guess I just think it's like kind of absurdity to say that God doesn't fit within Christian ethics. So sure, well, we can go on my ethics. That's totally fine.
I don't know what you mean by an absurdity. What game are you playing?
Well, I just think that it's an absurdity to say that the Christian God.
So about that, a lot of people attributed natural disasters to God. It's common in all faiths, right? Okay, true.
God doesn't fit within Christian ethics. That, like, the Christian
I
God
didn't say
isn't like
that.
Christian
I said
ethical.
that the specific statements that you made don't take the context of the stories into account, and so that your analytical approach is faulty.
Sure.
Don't put words in my mouth.
Sure, then let's go through the example. Yeah, so I apologize. So let's go through the example. So in 1 Samuel 15:3, God says, go and slaughter the Amalekites.
Personally, I think that more words should be put in Jordan Peterson's mouth because it's funny.
Slaughter the men, the women, the children, the infants. What's the justification for that? Is that in line
That's a
with
good
Christian
question.
ethics?
That's a good question. I don't really know what to do with the terrible, blood-soaked, saturated history of the human past. I don't know, and I don't think anybody knows. I mean, what you try to do in your own life, as far as I can tell, is to conduct yourself in a manner that makes such things much more unlikely.
I totally agree.
We're all saddled with the problem of the catastrophes that got us here, aren't we?
Yeah, but this one was commanded by God. That's the problem.
Yeah,
That's
well,
what differentiates it from anything else, is that this one, it's God
Do you
saying,
think that
go
there's
and do
ever
this
such a thing?
atrocity.
Do you think that there's ever such a thing as a righteous war?
I'm skeptical. I'm not sure. It would probably be situational.
Well, right, fair
Yeah,
enough.
but this
I mean,
one certainly wasn't a just war. The context for the Amalekite slaughter is that 400 years earlier, they fought one battle, which they lost, and God says, that's it, I'm going to wipe them off the face of the goddamn earth. And then 400 years later, he commands the Israelites to genocide their great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren. That's not a just war at all. And also, a genocide is not a war.
Well, genocide can be a war, but
Absolutely not.
Look.
The genociding of the Amalekites, the men, the women, and the...
A genocide can be a war, huh, Jordan? Okay. Well. Jordan Peterson justifying genocide? Well. Yeah, well, of course, like, in the mind of Jordan Peterson, this is, like, a pretty fucking, consistent fucking belief. Like, it makes sense, right? He believes in hierarchy, and those who are being genocided, you know, they either must have sinned or did something wrong in order to deserve to be genocided, right? You know, makes sense, right?
The infants, that's not a war. The infants aren't combatants.
look, I already said that it's very difficult to look at the blood-soaked past and to know exactly what to do about it. The answer I gave to the general...
Like, again, this is the same dude that said, like, Netanyahu, give them hell, you know, when the attacks on Palestine started happening. He did say literally added Netanyahu and said, like, give him hell. So it makes sense that Jordan Peterson would be okay with genocide.
Woman who is sitting here before you is that it's necessary to read a text like the Bible at all of its levels of analysis simultaneously. And there's a directional morality that emerges across time that has its roots in the Old Testament, for example, with its restrictions against murder specifically, that makes itself manifest in the Christian texts as the insistence on voluntary self-sacrifice as the foundational belief. That's a profoundly anti-violence ethos.
Do you have the belief in your theology?
Well, what do you think of that? Wait a sec. No, redress
So,
what I
yeah,
just
so
said.
I'm about to address it, but I'm addressing it with a question. Do you think that God is by his very essence perfect?
You'll have to provide more...
Sure, just like maximally great in all
I think
great
it's a
qualities.
definition. Sure.
Yeah,
By
like
definition.
flawless, yeah. So,
Okay,
so
so
does a
wait a
flawless
second,
thing change? Does a flawless thing reveal like more and better information over time? Or will a flawless thing say, here's what's good, here's the absolute good thing to do at all circumstances in time?
Well, we know some of that.
Wait,
Tell
so
the truth. That's one.
That's totally fine, but
No,
presumably...
you don't get to say no to that,
because
that's totally
it's a
fine.
straw man of my position. It's a straw man of the argument. So
Wait,
the argument is that
wait a sec. You said
wait a
find
second.
one maxim that's transcendent across
I
situations.
didn't say any of those words. I'm not sure what
Let me
conversation you're
rephrase
a part
it.
of.
Don't be a smartass.
I'm sorry.
Seriously, I mean it. If we're going to have a serious conversation.
He's
you got
getting
yourself
mad.
Okay, rephrase your question because I must have missed it. I tried to answer it.
So in my mind, I guess by my lights, a perfect being doesn't change. A perfect being, if they're maximally good, maximally moral...
Does our understanding of the perfect being change?
Our understanding might, but
Okay, how do we
presumably the perfect
distinguish?
being is
Well, I
revealing.
agree. How do we distinguish between that though at the human level?
How do we distinguish between
Between our transforming understanding of perfection and perfection itself.
Between our
we can only, yeah, well, we can only see through our own lenses.
Presumably a perfect being would
Don't
revealing
be a
all these aspects of
smartass,
especially God outside
bucko.
time. I don't know how a God who's outside of time
How does
is
something-
revealing different things at different times. That just seems like incoherent to me.
Imagine something that's perfect
Sure.
and complete.
Sure.
Okay, and it's trying to communicate with creatures who are anything but that.
Sure.
Well, they're going to get it wrong.
Sure,
Okay,
but
now,
like-
wait a sec. Do you blame that on the interpreters or the phenomena itself?
So
like, for example, are you perfectly attending to your conscience?
Hold on. At the point in time when God is literally the one who created us, he could have created us in a way where we would always be receptive to these principles, where we don't have to go across like a learning curve, where maybe we'll understand
maintain
like
free will.
thousands of years in the future. Maybe we'll do it. Also, if you believe in an all-knowing God, then free will is impossible because
Wait a
if
sec. Let's not go
maybe
there
because
yet.
you threw free will into the mix.
Well,
like,
that was
am
the
I-
answer to your question.
Yeah, and
You
I'm
said,
saying
why
that's
wouldn't God...
incoherent.
Well, you know,
It's
a thousand
contradictory.
years of deep thinking philosophers would disagree with you.
Yeah,
but
and
have
a
no-
thousand years of, or at least like the last 50 years of philosophers would disagree with you. These analytic philosophers, people like Graham Oppy make arguments about the incompatibility of omniscience and free will. That if God created this world, if he chose this world instead of that world, then he makes it causally inevitable every single action that you were going to make. If he made a world where we were just electrons in love, then none of this would have happened. But by making us in this world, knowing exactly what's going to happen in the future, it makes all of those events inevitable, which means that they're all causally determined, which means that we have no free will if you believe in an all-good God or an all-knowing God that made everything.
No, have it your way.
Okay, cool.
I
So
don't,
then
I
free will
don't,
theodicy fails.
well, it fails for you. That doesn't mean you've disproved it. I mean,
Do you
you tried to
understand
make,
the argument?
yes, you tried to make a case for a causally deterministic universe. I don't think there's any evidence for that at all.
Do you think that God could have created a different universe than the one that he created?
I have no idea.
Okay, so then there's going to be a double bind, right? So either he couldn't have done it, in which case he lacks the power, or he could have done it, in which case we don't have free will, because he chose this world instead of that world, making the events of this world instead of that world inevitable with his infallible
I don't
knowledge.
understand where you're headed.
Which means that the free will defense fails. Like all this, like under
Like I
your
said,
view,
if you want to have it
free
fail,
will.
no problem. I don't know why it's relevant to the issue.
Do you
we discussed.
acknowledge that under your view free will doesn't exist?
No.
Oh, then do you want to respond to the argument?
You'll have to phrase it more clearly so that someone like me can understand
Yeah,
it.
gotcha. So God already knows in advance everything.
I
that's going to
think
happen,
Jordan
which means that by
Peterson.
making this world instead of that.
No, it's because Jordan Peterson understands, but I don't think he doesn't. I don't think he agrees with free will. I think that's what it is. I just don't think he agrees with free will because again, if people have free will, that means it becomes harder to maintain, or it becomes easier to maintain hierarchy. Because again, Jordan Peterson does have one belief. It's this: Maintenance of systems of control and hierarchy. That's what he actually really believes in.
That world, everything is inevitable, which means that God's act of causing this world instead of that
Inevitable
world
doesn't mean determined.
It's causally inevitable if God chooses this world instead of that world.
Doesn't mean
Causally,
determined.
causally inevitable means determined.
No, it doesn't.
Absolutely, yes, it does.
Well, have it your way.
Okay.
That's not the case.
You've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
Yeah, I think he got kind of cooked there as well. Jordan Peterson's against free will, guys. Yeah, well, he'd be like that. Don't be a smartass, bucko.
Jordan, nice to meet you.
Very zippy. What's your name?
I'm Liam.
Hi, Liam. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Not too bad. I'm
Good.
surrounded by atheists.
My question to you, when I scoot in, would be, what does it mean to accept Christian values precisely, or Christian morality?
It means to aim up as hard as you can, no matter what happens to you.
Okay.
Okay.
So I think that that's a very broad definition of what Christian
Yeah, but it'll
morality
come in
is.
handy at some point in your life.
Right, but I think that many different disciplines and theologies.
Well, you asked for a truncated answer. I mean, there's other ways of representing the situation, but I wanted to give you something that was kind of foundational, brief.
Don't
Yeah,
be
I
a
guess.
smartass, bucko.
Exhaustive.
Yeah, yeah.
I could say that you would have to believe that Christ is God and he died for your sins, right? But that's, in a very difficult way to understand, that's the same claim.
Yeah, yeah. If there are other theologies and disciplines
Yeah.
that have similar types of values,
Yeah.
how then is that definition mean? Like, wouldn't those also be Christian values under your definition?
That's a good question. I spent a lot of time studying different religious systems from all over the world and found multiple interesting layers of concordance.
Right.
So, for example, in ancient Egypt, their god Horus, who was the reviving god of the totalitarian state,
Yeah.
he was the god of attention, right? And the Jews hypothetically came out of Egypt, and there was crosstalk between Egyptian and Jewish foundational morality, and then that bled into Christianity. I mean, human beings all over the world have come up with moral systems that fit roughly into a pattern, and,
Yes.
and they're very usefully studied. Now, I learned a lot about Christianity by studying Taoism, for example, like
Right.
a lot. So I think you can make a case that Christianity formalized the landscape of good and evil more comprehensively and in more detail than any other religious system, and I think that that's part of the reason that it defeated paganism and spread so broadly across the West and is still dominant, still understructures our culture, for example.
The way you feel about Horus or Taoism or something is how I feel about Christian morals, I think.
Yeah, but how do I feel about them?
Well, that you took inspiration from them, you learned from them. Maybe
That's a good start,
Right.
because I would say that actually constitutes belief. Like you said, well, look,
Right, right.
in Noah, in the story of Noah, right? Noah is inspired by the apprehension that all hell is going to break loose. Okay,
Yeah.
he regards that inspiration as God,
Okay.
right? And when God comes to Abraham, he comes to Abraham as the spirit of adventure. It's inspiration. One of the definitions of God in the Old Testament, unsurprisingly, given the derivation of the word, is inspiration. And so if you take inspiration from Christian ideas, then insofar as you do that, you are in fact a believer, which was my point with regards to atheists
Correct.
not
But
understanding.
have you
what they're
taken
rejecting.
inspiration from Taoism or from studying Egyptian mythology?
Definitely.
So then you believe them under that definition?
Yeah, but I've incorporated them into something I think that's more comprehensive.
Is it possible to take inspiration and to appreciate the teachings without being a believer in their truth claims?
No, I don't think so, but I think, you see, there are different kinds of truth claims, right? There's propositional truth claims, which are the truth claims of what you say, and then there's embodied truth claims, which is the truth claims of what you do. That should be prioritized. Optimally, what you say and what you do would be brought into harmony. But I would say if you had to prioritize, it should be what you attend to and what you act first. And that's what Christ actually says in the Gospels, because he points to the Pharisees, for example, who say all the right things, but don't do any of the right things, and points out very clearly that that's not acceptable.
I don't know that the Christian morality, those principles originate in Christianity, because you brought up other things that predate Christianity that you can very closely tie connections to.
Well, I don't think they do originate precisely. I mean,
Right.
I don't think the Christian claim is exactly that they originate Christianity.
So if I'm
right?
living those values, how is it that I'm living the Christian values and maybe not the Egyptian values or something else?
Well,
that you brought
one-
up?
There. You've been voted out.
That was good. That was good. Yeah.
Hi.
Hello there. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. What's your name?
I'm Kamari. So I was curious about this Christian morality that you're talking about, because a lot of my issues with Christianity have to do with the base morality of it, specifically with the idea of the rapture and how we see people that aren't going to come up with us with the rapture and that concept of heaven and hell. I don't really agree with that morality. But if you could explain that to me
love
how I do agree
going
with that,
on the
I'd love to
grind.
hear.
Well, I can't explain the rapture to you because that isn't something I concern myself with, and that's more of a sectarian belief and something that's central to Christianity. Now, there's all sorts of evangelical Protestants who might disagree with that, but that doesn't have anything to do with me. You asked a more deeper question with regard to, let's say, heaven and hell and judgment.
Yeah.
Well, that's a tough one, right? I mean, sin, you could put it this way, sin is what puts you in hell, right? And so then you might ask, well, how do you know you're in hell? How about you do anything to get out of it?
Can I ask
How
you a
about you know
question?
that you put yourself there?
Do you think is sin like a part of Christian morality?
What do you mean exactly? Sin is
Like
a part.
the
It's missing
concept of sin?
okay,
Yeah.
it's derived
I
from
mean,
Marxism, and
like-
it miss the target, right? And so,
Well,
presumes
because here's the thing, Boy Meets Mini. Like I've been saying before, for Jordan Peterson to be able to maintain his position, he has to believe in nothing. He has to know nothing, right? It's an absolute necessity. He can't know anything, because if he knows stuff, that means he can defend it. That means he believes in things. And you have to defend it, right?
that there's such a thing as a central target and that you can miss it in many ways. And the consequence of that will be your life will be ridden with anxiety, your life will be pointless,
What
people
if
will
I
turn against you.
don't believe in sin at all?
Well, do you believe in error?
I
Have you
don't.
made any mistakes?
What if I believe that the mistakes that you make, that they're fixable, and so that no sin is finite, and that the
Well, that's a
idea
Christian belief.
of the idea of hell, I don't believe
That's
in
also
it
a Christian belief, by the way.
A Christian belief is hell?
No, that there's no sin. Well, there's one. The sin against the Holy Ghost is unforgivable, but that's really the sin against the process that would enable you to learn.
Okay. But there's a Christian belief that hell does exist, and if I commit sin, I'm going to go there, correct?
Yes.
So what if I don't believe in that? Like I think
okay, let
that
me-
when you
okay,
can I
that's
explain a
fine.
little bit?
Sure,
Okay. I think that when you commit sin, that it's because of a lot of environmental factors in your life, like where you were born and who you were raised by. And so there are certain things that lead you down a dangerous path. And once you are dead, I think you're kind of removed of that person. There's no like
I
there
can't
are no
say- I
factors
can't
of the
say
earth
anything
that have
about
to.
what happens after death.
Right.
So I would ask you, in these times that you suffered terribly in ways that you thought would never
Yeah.
end, do you believe that you had any causal role in that? Like, did you play a part in that?
In my own suffering?
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes I would say that there was a part that I
Okay,
played
well,
in that.
okay,
But I
that's
also
the thing
do
to
think
find
that
out.
I think that maybe it's like a concept of free will that I don't really believe in somewhat of free will. But I think that there are certain things in your life that lead you to do certain behaviors, and so when you commit those sins, you go to hell. I'm not too sure why you would still be reaping the
do you,
consequences of that.
like I said, I can't address that. Do you believe that you can change?
I do.
Do you believe you can change for the better?
I do.
Do you believe that when you change for the better, you abandon the things you've done in the past that weren't good?
I think that you can.
Okay, then that's very much in keeping with Christian doctrine.
Can you explain to me how that's in keeping with Christian
Well,
doctrine? If you would go to hell for
okay,
those things?
you believe you can improve,
Yeah.
right? And you believe that if you improved, you would let go of things that were impeding you. That's a sacrifice. You believe that improvement would be upward, and you believe that you have agency in that. Yeah, those are all Christian presuppositions.
I guess maybe we have different opinions of what Christian morality is.
Yes,
so
sounds
I
like
think
it.
that my opinion of Christian morality is something that I don't really agree with. Maybe you would define that as like the foundations
Well,
of Christianity.
let me give you an example. So if you want to atone, which means to unify yourself, then unify that with the world, then the first thing you have to do is figure out what you did wrong and admit it. That's a confession. That was good.
Thank you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. I picked Zena because I think she asked genuine questions and wasn't trying to win.
Okay, well, hello
Hi
again.
there.
My claim is Jordan Peterson's framework for understanding Christianity is probably not the one that the Bible intended us to use. In regards to the way that you interpret the Bible, I don't see, you have said in some circumstances that there's not a way to kind of say whether or not
We love
ontologically the
interpreting
historical
the
claims made about the
Bible.
Bible are true. Like, for example, story of Cain and Abel. You said that this story is like a meta-truth in the sense that it exists all throughout time culturally. And the way that you define meta-truth, I don't see a distinction between that and like a metaphor, right? But and you also said you cannot say whether this story was true. You can say that it exists eternally, metaphorically, but you can't say that it's true. And if you can't say that there are historical facts being said in the Bible as stories that weren't really said with much ambiguity, how can we say that we can understand the Bible in the way that it's meant to be interpreted? Like, if you cannot make any claims about these stories, right? You don't know whether they're true or false. How do you know that your interpretation is the correct way?
See, that's why I picked you. You ask intelligent questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was good. What do they say? By their fruits, you'll know them.
Okay.
Right. Well, so one of the things I look at is the impact of what I'm doing. Right. And so I know a lot of evangelical Christians, a lot of Catholics, a lot of Orthodox Christians, a lot of people from other faiths. And they told me, like many of them, that they found my interpretations very helpful and that it deepened their faith. And so that's interesting because I wouldn't have necessarily expected that to be the case. And I've also talked to thousands of people who told me that they...
I wonder why Jordan Peterson may have those... Yeah, but he's not a Christian, by the way. And he's okay with these, like, I mean, that's the case with me. Yeah, I'd be like that Boy Meets Minnie. Can't believe that Boy Meets Minnie is still a Jordan Peterson fan to this day. Shaking my head.
Came to understand the foundational stories of their culture better as a consequence of listening to me, and that they did everything they could to sort out their lives and that it worked. That's many different pieces of evidence that all converge on something like the practical and conceptual utility of my approach. Now, is it the same? There's a lot of approaches to biblical interpretation historically, and what I'm doing is possibly less new than you think.
Yeah, I want to make a claim on whether this evidence is enough, right, to substantiate whether or not your interpretation is going to, be more plausible, right, be the most plausible. Because in regards
an open question.
Yeah, right.
You bet.
So in regards to how we interpret the Bible and how we see the Bible, something can add value to someone. Like an interpretation can add value to someone. Like, an interpretation can connect you to your conception of what your faith is. But if it's the quote-unquote interpretation that God does not intend, that can lead to a plethora.
That's certainly the case. That's why the medieval Christians were so concerned about heresy.
Exactly.
Yeah, because they felt, and that's why the Catholics objected so much to
Heresy.
Reformation, because they believed that the fractionation of Christianity would result in an indefinite fractionation, right? Well, and that's exactly what's happened.
Right.
So yeah, that's definitely a problem. I think one of the foundational principles, for example, there's a foundational principle in the Old Testament, hospitality. Right. So what you want to do if you set up your local environment properly is to make it welcoming to people voluntarily. And so one of the ways you could judge the validity of the interpretation of the classic story is whether or not that interpretation might be regarded by someone as welcoming. Does that represent something you'd actually like to have if you were acting in your own interest in the long run?
Right, and we can talk about that. Like
protect you from fear might be another one.
Exactly. So we can talk about like how interpretations of the Bible, like if they kind of resonate with us.
Yeah.
But I think that can in some case be some kind of like evidence. Oh, this might be true, but I think we should ask: is evidence damning? Right? Is it
Okay,
evidence
that's great.
certain? Right.
Yeah.
So, but I do want to look at again the consequences and our understanding of this interpretation once more. So we look at again the story of Cain and Abel, and we say, yeah. So I believe this is a meta truth. I believe that this story is resonant throughout cultures. That is all Trinitarian. I'm sure there is some in some way the story was put in here for the reason, right? To tell us about fights between brothers. But also you can't say I do know or I don't know that this story is false or true in an ontological historical sense as a historical fact. Were there two people like that were specifically referenced?
Okay, I don't think that's knowable, but
Right.
I'm not sure why it matters
Right.
to you.
So the reason why it matters to me is because we need to know how we should interpret the things that the Bible says. And
Many ways.
Right, but like if we interpret
Sometimes poetry, sometimes history,
Well,
sometimes facts,
but for
sometimes
example,
metaphor.
the reason why it's important, right, very important, is because for example, we talk about something like God says, I believe it's like 1 Corinthians 15:17, something about how belief in God specifically as someone who resurrected or as someone who died for our sins is important, right? But we have to look at, if we can interpret that as just like you believe that God is a symbol of sacrifice. That is different from believing that there's an actual person named Jesus Christ who died on the cross for our
That's
sins.
true.
So if you believe one and not the other, that can be the difference between you going to hell and you going to heaven. So if we cannot make like we cannot say that we know whether or not certain historical facts in the Bible happen, like even as just like events, like because the events matter, because again, God dying for our sins on the cross was an event. If we can't say that we know these things happen, these things that didn't happen, this then leads us to kind of like a conundrum of how do we know what we're meant to believe, what the Bible intended for us to believe, and this can be very, very important to like our fate. Do you see
Yeah,
what
I've got no disagreement with any of that. What sort of response do you want from that? You pushed me beyond the limits of my knowledge.
Really?
Well, there's so many things you can't know.
Yeah, Boy Meets Minnie. That's obviously the reason why heresy was used in like the Inquisition and shit like that. We all know like the Monty Python meme of like Inquisition. Yeah, he doesn't know that because again, he's okay with that, right? Jordan is okay with that because again, he wants to maintain control, right?
know that the biblical stories are the foundation of Western culture. I know that the consequence of those stories has been the genesis of a society that is in the main freer and more abundant than any societies have ever been. I don't exactly understand the relationship between those stories and that outcome, but it's not nothing.
Right.
But I don't know the answer to the questions that you're asking. You know, it's the case that forever when people have been interpreting religious stories, they wrestle with exactly the question that you just described. When is it fact? When is it poetry? When is it music? When is it metaphor? When is it ritual? When is it time-bound?
But what I'm saying is that your interpretation of the Bible, if you cannot tell us again if these historical events happen or not, that can be deciding factor if someone is like damned to hell for eternity or if they go to heaven, right? So that's why
I don't concern myself so much with that particular question. You know, like that would be something that would stem more from an evangelical viewpoint, and I'm not putting that down, by the way. You're asking me a question I really can't answer. I'm not claiming even that my interpretations are canonically correct. I can only tell you the consequences of having released them into the world, let's say.
Right. So I guess we kind of come to a conclusion about that, which I've kind of wrestled with your framework and pushed it kind of to its end, at least in the way that you can answer my question. So I don't know that we can more wrestle with that.
See, I guess the problem is, you see, I don't exactly understand. I don't think anybody does the relationship between fact and destiny. You know, well, they're different realms in a way.
Destiny.
Knowing what the world is made of doesn't help you navigate through it. Not really. It doesn't provide you with a foundation for navigation. But knowing the facts of the world is obviously useful. And the relationship between those two things, part of that's the mystery of Western civilization and the continued competition between science and religion.
To bridge this kind of understanding between fact and destiny is like an important question that the burden is on
Right,
Christianity
boy.
to interpret.
Yeah, that's why Jesus got crucified. Well, it wasn't the empire quite yet during that time. That was the late Roman Republic. He was a threat to Roman holdings, right? That's why Jesus ended up getting crucified. He was a threat to Roman holdings within, or at least like how the stories interpret it within like Palestine and Judea, right?
Of Christianity, if we can't do that,
why is the burden on Christianity?
Because it posits, right, that this interpretation, right, is going to be a way to understand God. But if it's faulty, right,
What evidence would you accept?
That would be an interesting question because I've seen people try to answer the question. And I've never really been moved because I know it's attacking against kind of gets to this point where the answer is I don't know.
Well, here's an answer.
Sorry, that's time. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Well, I definitely picked the right person. That was very good.
Thank you so much.
Very good. I don't like talking to win. But there were portions of all the conversations that were truly productive, and that it's instructive for people to...
I don't like talking to win, even though, like, I don't believe in anything. Okay, cool. I guess we're done here. Nice meme. No more Jordan Peterson. I care no longer about Jordan B. Peterson. I don't believe in anything because I can't believe anything. Yeah, there were some instances where he got cooked pretty bad. Yeah, that Danny guy pretty much clocked him perfectly, which is why he got fucking triggered. I probably should have just like ended it there. Actually, no, there was the other guy. There was the guy right after that was pretty good. I clocked him on stuff. I don't really have to. I can't really say as much because I don't know as much about like all the religious shit. I'm not particularly religious or whatever, so I can't really like comment really on that stuff. I do know about the sort of like positions that Jordan Peterson has, and Jordan Peterson again. First and foremost, what does he believe in? Maintenance of control and hierarchy. Of first order principles with Jordan Peterson. That's what he cares about the most, right? Never forget that. Ever, right? If you're engaging with a Jordan Peterson fan, he'll constantly deny this every single time. But again, this is what his like sort of like principle belief mostly stems from. There's always has to be something on the top. And you can see this in particular when he especially talks about economic issues, right? He believes that it is justifiable that there are millionaires and billionaires on the top because it is about maintenance of hierarchy. If there is anything in the sort of like, I don't know, superposition of things that like Jordan Peterson has alleged belief in, and there's one thing that is consistent with him. Hierarchy. So in that instance, it is perfectly reasonable to always clock him as a fucking conservative. No matter how much he and his like fans like to fucking cope and seethe about it. First and foremost, he is a fucking conservative because again, for him, overall, maintenance of hierarchy and control. That's all that he cares about. And you can mostly tell when he's talking about all of his bits with like a hierarchy and whatnot. Yep. Can't really say anything else about that. He got cooked pretty bad in terms of some of those like religion debates, especially from like Danny and Brian there. He got pretty good there. So, yeah. Nothing else really to say there.